Manhattan Community Board One's Environmental Protection Committee meeting. I'm Alice Blank, Chair of the committee, joined by Co-Chair Wendy Chapman and Lucian Reynolds, CB1's District Manager. First on the agenda is the timeline for comments for the United States Army Corps of Engineers Harbor and Tributaries Focus Area Feasibility Study, also known as HATS. There will be a resolution on this item, the only one noted currently for tonight. For a brief description of this item, I'm pleased to welcome Kate Boycott, Director of New York, New Jersey Climate Resilient Coasts and Watersheds at the Environmental Defense Fund. And you may remember Kate Boycott as the former Director of Resiliency at the Waterfront Alliance. So delighted Kate could join us. Kate provided 2 letters which the committee received, signed by over 20 city and state environmental groups, asking for an extension to the comment period on the HAT study, which currently is to end on January 6th. Kate hopes that community boards throughout the city will help advocate for an extension to the deadline on the comment period. So thanks, Kate, for just a brief introduction. If anyone has questions, thanks.
Great, and thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure to hang out with Alice, but also this community board. I've seen you all a few times. And Alice, you've been super helpful in kind of making that connection between the community board and some of these other things that are happening. Just a brief amount of history, because I don't have a lot of time. I personally, and many of the organizations that signed those letters, have been involved in commenting on this study since its inception, from a science perspective and a community engagement perspective. And I'd say there's sort of a few core things that, no pun intended, that we've been focused on over the years with the study, both regionally, but also nationally. And this is something that we've worked as Environmental Defense Fund, and also in my former role as part of the Rise to Resilience Coalition and Waterfront Alliance to change federal law to create a more robust engagement process so that there's more engagement of communities in these decisions. Second, a more multi-hazard approach. That's something that we've found, especially when it comes to incorporating sea level rise over time in the way that the Corps evaluates the costs and benefits of different projects. That's something that's we found has been lacking. And then lastly, really trying to make sure that equity and environmental justice are at the forefront of decision making here. So just briefly on, I think our focus here is on the sort of the timeline of this study. This is an incredibly complex study for which the Corps itself does not really have has not had the capacity in the past month really to get out the word about the study adequately from our perspective. We've had some conversations with the Colonel and the team since May about creating this work group, which they agreed to, and we provided some input on the engagement process. But really the timeline that they had, they put out the study on September 30th, and most of those even in our group hadn't even heard about it and had to find it on the website. And the first public meeting was October 24th, and they really have only budgeted time-wise for just a few public meetings about this study that could cost, $52 billion and impact our backyards and waterfronts for generations to come. So we want to make sure that it gets done right, and we feel strongly that it can get done right within the timeline that they have proposed. So the first time that this could likely get authorized is the Water Resources Development Act of 2024, which generally that's Congress has to authorize this after the Corps and the states and the city agree to it. And that would happen in sort of fall, winter of 2024. The last time the Water Resources Development Act was passed, it was December 25th, I think. It was like a Christmas thing. And so there is a timeline from now until this study is finalized that we think really should have a more iterative public approach. So that's really why we've been pushing on this extension of the engagement process. I know that the city has pushed the Corps to go beyond the existing timeline that they proposed as well, and the Corps has reflected that they are planning for the possibility of the extension. but we still have to kind of wait for the headquarters of the Corps of Engineers to sort of rubber stamp that extension. So we're really not sure, and it certainly can use help. In that time, I personally, and I know several other folks I'm working with, will be working to try to get the word out beyond those public meetings. Because if you ask most folks, they really don't know about this. And this specifically does connect to Community Board 1. It connects to many other parts of the city that are not aware of it. And while a lot is to be determined in terms of what the design could look like overall, there's still sort of a decision process on what types of measures, whether that's a berm, that's a seagate, whether that's a wall in a specific area or watershed. Those things are being decided right now. And once that sort of gets decided, you're kind of marching on a process towards that. And we want to just make sure that that gets done right and that engages communities in the process. So that's just the broad pitch of why we are where we are. And then I'm happy to answer any questions about that.
Kate, that was great. So I will open it up for questions. We generally start with committee members, so let's go with that. Anybody have a question or? Okay, Wendy, see you're up.
Yeah, that was great. And I'm so glad that you're explaining it a little bit better. I think one of the things that, I listened to the presentation they made, and I was alarmed by how many caveats were shared to say that, obviously it's a very expensive project and it's going to need federal money, but, there was also a hint that it needed to be state and city as well. I mean, given those ratios. And they said if everything goes perfectly, and he made it clear that that was very difficult with all the congressional approval and this kind of thing, that the earliest they would start building would be 12 years from now. Does this, do you still think that they could start 12 years from now? Because, of course, the thing that I keep worrying about, and I sent a note to the whole committee, is that if sea level really is going to rise by 10 to 12 inches in the next 30 years, and half of that time almost is used just planning, are we going to be able to figure this out in time? So I just wonder how you feel about that piece of it. And then of course, how long it takes to build, even just in our neighborhood. He couldn't say which side of the street or where it would go or how high it would be, but obviously it's pretty extreme. I'm just curious what you feel about all of that, because,
Yeah.
I want to be thoughtful and I want to get the right design, but at the same time, I'm afraid it won't happen in our lifetime.
Yeah. So I guess 3 points in response to that. First, on your point about the city and the state, and it's actually the state of New Jersey, the state of New York, and the city are the non-federal partners in this study, and they do cost share this. So I think it's 65-35. We can follow up on that specifically, but 65% federal and 35% local. And so yes, they have to pony up some resources for this. In terms of the question about the overall timeline, also, we're concerned about that as well. And that's one reason why we've been really advocating for a phased approach, so that the things that are going to make more impact and are easier to build are prioritized for authorization. And I think that's something we really want to push on Congress for, as well as the city and the states. And again, we don't want to extend the overall study. What I'm trying to articulate here is that there's kind of a standard process when the standard timeline when these things get authorized by Congress. The Water Resources Development Act happens every sort of couple of years, and that is what authorizes studies like this and the overall purview of the Corps and what work it gets to do. And we don't see that happening again until the end of 2024. So what we're arguing for here is a more iterative and lengthened public comment period within that timeline. So we're not arguing for an extension of the overall timeline of the provision of the study, but for the delivery of the public engagement.
That makes a lot more sense. Thank you.
And actually one thing, and then I should address everybody else's questions. I think Alice and I were talking about this beforehand. I have pushed them in a meeting sort of specifically related to Community Board 1, but I actually haven't gotten to this level of detail and conversation with them about it, and I'm not sure if you have or not. But I understand we're still a $9.5 billion short in the Seaport Master Plan. And to the extent that there's a way to get federal funding for some of that study, I know they mentioned the sort of lower west side of Manhattan, but I think that's something to ask them about and to inquire a little more detail about, because maybe there's a way in here to get some resources for a portion of that, because the city doesn't have that.
That's a great point, Kate.
Really
Thanks.
great point. Thank you.
Thanks. Jeff Galway.
I think you've largely answered my questions. In terms of the time frame, I share Wendy's concerns about, any further delay and what's likely to be a long, drawn out process that may very well be built after I'm dead. But if I understand what you're saying is that the natural time for congressional authorization the next time around is the end of 2024 anyways. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
And that
The only exception to that is if there's a huge storm and somehow the Corps is ready to go, which is unlikely by then, they could get an emergency authorization potentially, but that is an unlikely scenario. I'm a scientist, so I plan for all scenarios. So I'll say that exception, but at the end of 2024 is the natural cycle of Water Resources Development Act.
whether or not we were to extend the comment period. Is that what you, absent a storm or whatnot, but if you were going by the normal cycle, whether or not we extend the comment period, the authorization, if everything goes swimmingly well, would be at the end of December, at the end of 2024 in any event. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and I think that's that point you can make in your resolution. You can argue for that you don't want to delay in the study, you want it authorized by WRDA 2024, but you would like to maximize the public comment period to really meet the challenge.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Richard Corman.
Yeah, my questions essentially have been answered, so I appreciate that, Kate. So I could reserve my comments when we talk about the resolution, since I certainly feel that we cannot minimize the importance of community engagement. We've seen the problems that occur when communities are not engaged in projects that are infinitely simpler than this. And how incredibly complex this is. So while I promise to reserve my comments, I made a few anyway.
Thanks, Richard. I should just say that Kate has a hard stop at 6:30, and so do we on this particular item, so we can keep, moving along. So just keep that in mind. If you have heard your comment already, then I would ask you don't repeat it. Okay, Laura Starr.
Hi, Kate. Thank you for being on the case. This is such a relief. And I agree with everything you said. One question I have is, the Army Corps, the solution that they are saying is the most feasible from their financial perspective, which for one thing, I don't really believe their benefit cost analysis for a variety of reasons. But anyway, my question is, shouldn't we create a mechanism so that all the communities affected by this intervention that they are proposing, that we all come together and look at it? I mean, it looks like it would ruin Coney Island and a bunch of other waterfront communities. And, they have no idea how they're really going to put a wall along our community. I don't know. What do you think about us all coming together in a more organized way?
Yeah, yes. Yes. So I want to say one thing in defense of the Corps' sort of, they have their process, which is unique. These are lines on a map. They do indicate a suite of measures. They're not saying that, there's going to be exactly a wall here. So there is an ability at a future phase to get into the design. But I think the question, and I've been pushing them on this, and I think you can push them on this too, and I've been pushing the city to push them on this. What are the decisions that community members can inform right now in the stage we're in, so that we're making sure that suite of options is not too narrow, or not taking us down the wrong path. And I'm happy to follow up on the cost benefit analysis and what's not included in more detail anytime. The sort of coming together, I've been talking with Amy Chester a lot. I think we're going to work on some public engagement potentially around this. I'm not sure, we're not sure yet what that looks like. But I think, trying to get a little bit more consistency on what we're calling for. But I think there's a great opportunity for community boards to play that role through borough boards or other. And so happy to follow up on that too.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. I mean, I have a few other questions and comments, but if you have a hard stop, I'll let other people go ahead with questions.
And maybe what I can do, and I mentioned this to Alice, I don't have draft comments yet, even for somebody that's been working on this for 4 years. It's hundreds of pages to go through. And so I think I will have an outline of some of the areas that we'll be focusing on, and would love to just share in the interest of having sort of messy versions of our public comments around so that folks can use them.
I mean, yeah, I like just one of my other, well, definitely I agree we need more engagement. I mean, sorry, go ahead. Let somebody else go. Does somebody else have a question?
I'm not sure, but I see a Tammy's, somebody's saying something. I'm not sure if they're on.
Just mute Andrea Jew. She's the one.
Oh,
There you go.
okay.
She's muted now.
So we have I'm not going to entertain a second level of questioning here because we do have to have a hard stop here in 5 minutes. So Tammy, you had your hand up. Yes, you did.
Thanks, I did. Thank you, Kate, very much for the presentation. In trying to look at a holistic approach and trying to be able to make sure that we actually, in this case, borrow money from Peter to pay Paul, we know in Community Board 1, so much of our space will already have resiliency plans and measures that are paid for. So my question and concerns, and maybe you can opine on any of this, when they presented to CB2, he did say that the funding would have to be approved at the end of 2024. And after that, they would be, if I understood correctly, they'd be looking at what measures were already in place to really get numbers a little bit more refined. That does seem like putting the cart before the horse in a lot of ways, because there's several, hundreds of millions of dollars, potentially even 750 million that will be already completed in Lower Manhattan. So how do we help get that down so it's a number that potentially Congress says, yeah, we should definitely fund all this?
I'm not sure I fully understand your question.
Their procedure had them going before Congress, final plans in 2023, final draft kind of scope, and then going to Congress for funding in 2024. And they've not taken into account any of the existing projects, they said, that are ongoing, that are being built. So
yeah. Again, I'm not sure if I'm going to answer this because I'm not sure I fully understand. But yes, that is the timeline that I'm referring to, and that's when Congress says, "Hey, we're going to authorize or not." Whether they include, in addition to authorization, appropriations, separate bill, and for what amount that year, that's another question. So there's sort of two things that we'll have to pay attention to in 24. That authorization and the amount. How we look at how much has been allocated from the city and the state and the ability for us to be ready to match those federal dollars, I think that is taken into account in that equation, because there's a conversation between the cities and the states and and Congress as to like what can we spend right now. So that I think there has to be some level of commitment from the states and the city at that time. I'm not sure if I answered your question there, but I'm not sure I'm also able to get super specific about that at this time.
It's okay. I mean, I think it was interesting to learn actually that there's two separate things that have to go, the scoping first and foremost, and the appropriations second, because you could conceivably get the scoping passed, but not the appropriations.
Yeah, and you could do both at once. I mean, hopefully that's what we kind of need. So you want to get the stamp saying Congress says it's okay to proceed on this study. We approve it. But then also they're allocating the resources at the same time, because there are authorizations, meaning that the rubber stamp studies that haven't gotten money right away or are still waiting.
Okay, thank you so much, Kate. We were 2 minutes before your deadline. I'm gonna, I don't see any other hands up, so I think we are at a point where we can sort of put the basic bullets on a resolution. I can't thank Kate enough. You'll come back, of course, I know, to discuss this all further, but let's just sort of focus right now on just asking whether or not this committee is in support of the two letters that were circulated, which basically are looking to advocate for an extension to the timeline. And so far, I hear that there's an acute need for more community engagement with absolutely no delay, given the situation of the urgencies of the matter of resiliency, and to maximize public comment. And what else would you like to have in this resolution? And then we can vote on it, I guess, assuming. Okay, Richard, go ahead. Can you?
Sorry. Yeah. I think we also somehow have to ensure that we maximize public education in
Okay.
this. This is a very complex issue, and just time for comment, it doesn't really cover the concept of, serious dissemination of information through all levels of the community, particularly those that don't normally come to community board meetings and normally come to other general meetings. I think there has to be a way of getting this information out to people that aren't normally paying general attention to this kind of thing.
Terrific, good point. If somebody objects to any point that's being raised, let us hear from you. Okay, Wendy. These are just
Yeah.
things to add to the resolution. Yeah.
I was going to say, just to add on that point, is that I actually think that when we're talking about getting the word out, I actually would ask for them to, visibly put signage up in the communities that are going to be affected, and, encouraging engagement, and just that. So I just think that, to Richard's point, we need to be more specific. That was the biggest problem with Wagner, is that they didn't put physical signs in the place until the very last minute, is one of the problems. Thank you.
Terrific. Better systems for getting the word out, absolutely, and signage, no objection there, at least for me. Okay, Jeff.
I think we should indicate in the resolution our understanding that the extension requested would not delay the presentation to Congress at the end of 2024, and that's important to us, because if I understand things correctly, if we miss that time frame, we're looking at 2026, another 2 years delay. And I'd hate to add 30 days too much to a comment period and end up delaying the project by 2 years. So I agree that the public engagement is incredibly important, but I think we should indicate our expectation and desire that this be ready for congressional presentation for authorization at the end of 2024.
Good point. Thanks. Any objections? No, include it. Okay. Laura, Star?
So I'm not sure how this gets included, but the Army Corps, their approach to this it's kind of monolithic. It's like they're looking at these interventions, but they're not really looking at how this gets integrated into our urban design. Like, I think if it were up to them, they would just literally build a wall. And that's essentially what they're doing on Staten Island. And then the city has to come back in and weave it back into the park system, make sure people can get from the communities inland from the barrier out to their waterfront. And it's one thing on Staten Island where you have a lot of space, but when you're talking about these really constricted areas like, along Hudson River Park, it what they're doing has to be so much more integrated with state DOT, with city DOT, with Hudson, with parks, with all these, with DEP, DEC, all these systems. And I have yet to see that level of integration happen on any of these resilience projects. And so I don't see, I think that as part of this, we need to see true integration with urban design. And we don't have to say this part in the resolution, but if you think about it, 9A needs to be rethought. Probably Hudson River Park needs to be widened. Probably parts of it need to be elevated because this barrier is doing nothing for sea level rise. It's not going to elevate where we go jogging, where our kids play on the piers, where we play miniature golf, any of that. That's all going to stay at the same elevation in what they're showing. What's going to happen is there's going to be some kind of barrier to protect the real estate behind the barrier. So if we, when sea level rises, want to be able to still go running and cycling along the waterfront, we need a completely different level of integrated and phased planning than what they're talking about.
100%. I think, let's not get ahead of ourselves though, although I do think some of this should be included. Let's keep in mind, we're just asking for an extension.
Okay, I totally agree with the extension and everything anybody said. I just wanted to put this out there because when we think about how we're going to be really planning as a community planning board, there's a lot of stuff we can be doing.
Absolutely. And we've invited, or I'm trying to invite the Army Corps, Bryce Weissmuller, to come back to this community board to talk, much more specifically about our community and the plans, at which point, of course, we'll issue a resolution, and it's hoped that it won't be by January 6th, and maybe this extension will have happened so we can really have a very in-depth conversation about all these features that you're describing, which are critical. But I think some of them could certainly, in indicating why we want an extension, some of this can be identified, reviewing urban design integration and such, that we would obviously need more time to do that as a community. So I think that's fair.
And I think we do need a more nuanced benefit cost analysis that takes into account the real estate implications of what they're showing. I mean, if you put a wall in front of the first floor or two of Hudson Riverfront real estate, I mean, that just that's not even going to happen because are they including the cost of buying out the owners of those two floors because they're losing the value? I don't know. I just think they haven't really dealt with the reality of New York City.
Right. I think the points you're raising underline very emphatically the need for an extension to the comment period.
Yes. Okay. Well, there's no question that they need
for sure.
an extension. So yes, that goes without saying.
Yeah, I think that's, yeah. And we should drive it home. By the way, Lucian, I assume you're here and also taking notes because we're counting on you for.
Yes, I'm taking notes. I have one clarifying question for the committee. So these are two sign-on letters. Both are very elaborated, and I don't know if what you're seeking for me to do is to ask them to edit the letters with these comments that everyone is making, or if we're going to have we're asking the chair to sign her name to this, or to add CB1 as a co-signatory, and then also have a resolution that says these things kind of in parallel.
I think what we're looking for is the latter, which is to say that, it's great that Tammy signs the letters, of course, but additionally, I think we should have a resolution that shows our support of the letters and then indicates some of these additional items that we've just described. So we have both. Does anyone object to that idea? Okay. See no hands.
That makes sense to me.
Okay, Jeff, is that an objection hand or a?
No, I'm not sure that I object. I'm trying to clarify. First clarification, I mean, these letters are dated November 8th. Have they already gone out? And so is our resolution, if so, then wouldn't our resolution be a reference to the letters and say that we support the request therein, and then elaborate specifically on the deadline points and everything else we've been talking about. I
Yeah,
expect you see
that's
Tammy
important.
Rates shaking her head. Yes, is that okay? That's fine with me.
Good. Okay, great. I see somebody that doesn't have a name up with a little hand up in the left corner, and I don't know who it is. So I'm sorry, but without a name, I can't call on you. I don't know if you can figure this out, Lucian, but there's somebody with a hand raised on the panel, but there's no name. It just says, oh, you know what? I think it's you. Okay, never mind. Okay, Tammy, you're up, and then I'm closing this down to perhaps we get a vote here. Do you have something you want to add, Tammy?
Alice, I wanted to add about the appropriations as that put a comment in there that we would like the appropriations to be done either simultaneously or in conjunction and have no delay for that, because it'd be terrible that we get a scoping and then it's, then wait another 10 years for appropriations and funding.
Okay. I'm going to leave Lucian to get that one right because I wasn't sure I'm crystal clear on that either, but good. We got it. So I think we have all the basic tenets here. Do we have a vote to consider this a resolution and support of this extension, given what we've described tonight? I see, Wendy, is that a second? That's a yes, okay. Are you seconding this motion to support this resolution?
Motion seconded.
Okay, thanks.
For the
All
record,
right.
it has to be a voice second.
Does anyone have any, well, Lucian, you want to take everyone through the drill here? or
So
you
if
want-
you're looking to vote and you're on the committee, you'll need to make sure your camera's on. We have a
Okay.
couple people, and let me just make some notes of a couple people who joined us since I took the last role.
Okay, so put your cameras on if you can. I know we have one member who asked that who's not feeling well, asked that her camera be off. So,
Unfortunately, if that affects quorum, that's going to be a problem.
okay, well, I don't think it will, but let's see what happens. Okay, let's go with it here. Lucian, we gotta move it along. Sorry,
Right.
but we've got a long.
So we'll take this as an acclamation vote. All those who are opposed? All those who are abstaining? All those who are recusing themselves? Hearing none, this motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thanks very much. And I didn't get to thank Kate Boycott, but in absentia, thank you, Kate Boycott from the EDF. Okay, next up, thanks very much. So the second item on tonight's agenda is the review of the interim flood protection measures for the west side of Community District 1. And I'm pleased to welcome Susan Rosen, Mitigation Operations Program Manager of the Office of Emergency Management for the city. And this is a follow-up that she very kindly was willing to give us with a more in-depth review of the interim measures from what we saw a few months back at the LMCR presentation by Jordan Salinger, where we learned that in fact, for whatever reason, it was a little unclear, we have none, and that they can't be done on the west side. So I think everyone would like to know a little bit more about that. So it's really appreciative that Susan can come. So thanks, Susan. Take it away.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I know we did not have a lot of time back in October to really go into this in as much depth. So thank you for inviting me back and giving me a chance to, present a little more fully. I think I'm trying to share. I think that's working. So, I know that most of you have probably heard this before, but just let me do the brief overview. The interim flood protection measures was created in 2016 when the city asked New York City Emergency Management and what was then the Mayor's Office of Recovery and Resilience and Recovery, to think about what could be done in the short term to provide some flood risk reduction while critical city facilities and some low-lying neighborhoods were having longer term, more permanent mitigation designed and implemented. And so this is the program that we developed. We use 3 different measures in our program. Most of you are familiar with probably the HESCOs and the Tiger Dams that you see in the picture. But on the right-hand side, you do see the the flood panel type, which has a post that's fitted on either side of a doorway, where we're usually using that to protect like a boiler room or an electrical room. But then on the right side, you can see the picture of the HESCO barriers, which are the wire mesh fabric cage that's filled with compacted clean fill material. And those, we try to put out as many of those as we can in what we call the pre-deployed situation, where we're not going to be impacting the traffic or the daily operations of a site, so that cuts down on the amount of work that we have to do in the just-in-time period, just before a storm. Then in that time period, just before the storm, we would come back with our contractors and fill in the gaps that we left for daily operations with those more HESCOs or the giant water-filled tubes that you see in the middle that are the Tiger dams. So I always like to brag a little bit that over the course of the program, we have operationalized 57 sites. That does include 32 DEP pump stations where DEP manages the just-in-time deployment. And it also includes several sites that have achieved their permanent mitigation and that have been able to be retired from the IFPM program. We also want to point out it is not a life safety program. It is about protecting critical infrastructure so the city can continue to provide those critical services, and that residents must follow all evacuation orders that are issued by the city. So this is one of the slides that I showed in October. In 2019, IFPM agreed to review 2 additional areas for alignments. In the fall and winter of 2019, we started that process with walkthroughs that included DEP, DOT, MOCEJ, DDC, etc., as well as starting to gather all the necessary GIS and DEP data. But then COVID-19 forced us into a pause. We were finally able to restart the process this past spring and able to complete the steps for the flood extent mapping, additional site visits, DEP dye test, surveys, wave action analysis, and then review of the building usage. The full assessment is just now drawing to a final close for both sites, and we were asked now to come back and give you some more depth on the Tribeca findings. So I just want to give a little bit of background. When the engineers start to evaluate a site, they gather all of this data on the ground elevation, the inundation levels that are expected at different types of storms, and then the drainage infrastructure. This guides them in developing a general corridor where placing IFPM would provide the most possible advantage based on the topography and the location of drainage infrastructure. The low point along the corridor will determine the maximum height of surge that IFPM would be effective in blocking. So that's known as the level of protection. So I've turned this image on its side to be able to make it a little bigger. So the bluish purple areas are showing the amount of surge that would be blocked if IFPM measures were added to the topography here. So all of our measures top out at 4 feet of height above ground elevation. So in this case, that translates into what we call 7.5 feet NAVD88. NAVD88 is used to provide a common point of reference, which is generally understood as sea level for the contiguous US and Alaska. And then the ground elevation data comes from the US Geological Survey LIDAR digital elevation models. So again, with the 4 feet of height that IFPM adds to the ground elevation, we know that we would be able to stop approximately what would be considered 7.5 feet above the sea level in terms of surge. Anything below that isn't really going to have an impact on the buildings that you see highlighted here. Anything above that would come over the top of IFPM and impact the buildings. So just to help, we also have to take into consideration the wave action. So that also can affect in terms of, again, overtopping. It can also bring wave energy that could potentially dislodge these temporary measures. So this image, we took away the inundation to make it hopefully a little clearer, but the same buildings that were touched in that earlier slide are highlighted here. And the different colors indicate whether those buildings are already protected to the 7.5 feet, either because they were built after the adoption of New York City flood-resistant building codes in 1984, or are above the 7.5 feet first floor elevation point, or they have flood risk reduction measures that were installed by the owners. That leaves buildings that were built before 1984, or sometimes the year is just unknown. And typically that tends to be because the building has been demolished and is being rebuilt or something like that. But we included those because there wasn't the data. And so it's hard to see, but this actually includes 4 buildings. And you see the large building here, actually it's 5 buildings with this large red building that actually is a vacant lot. The last time I was there, it may have been started to be constructed, but it would be new construction and subject to those new building codes. Then the darker purple are the buildings that you know, are the ones that would potentially be able to have some benefit from any kind of temporary measures that we would be able to put there. So I broke it down into a chart. I know, just to see if, you know, some people may be able to take in the information better this way. So there were a total of 33 buildings in that 7.5 foot flood extent that would be touched by water at that level. 14 of those buildings had a first floor elevation above 7.5 feet. 7 of those buildings have their own, you know, the owners did some kind of building level flood protection. And then 7 of them were built after 1984. One of them is that vacant lot. So it's, you know, we don't have any information about it, but it's, again, there's nothing to protect there. So 3 buildings in the rest, and that were built before 1984, have a first floor elevation above 7.5 feet, and then the other one is unknown. 2 of those buildings are being renovated. So potentially, if it's a big enough renovation program, then they would also be subject to bringing it up to the code. So this is the same slide that I presented in October. I just want to kind of go back over the details a little bit. So again, the maximum level of protection is 7.5 feet. Large majority of buildings in this flood extent have its own flood protection or are already have a first floor elevation over 7.5 feet. And this translates into what we call a 15-year event at 7.5 feet, which means that every year there's a 6.7% chance of this kind of storm happening, if that sometimes speaks to people who have some familiarity with the 15-year event, et cetera. Again, most buildings have their own protection or are above that, and that only left the 4 buildings that could receive any sort of benefit. I also want to point out that it, you know, in addition to this minimal benefit that IFPM would provide, it's really outside the scope of our engineers and our program to rule out groundwater undermining that could happen within individual buildings, and which then would have the potential to undermine any alignment across the site. There are also, you know, major challenges in terms of, you know, putting this flood protection. It would be necessary because of the drainage infrastructure to close the West Side Highway in several places. And so that's really something that needs to be considered. So on its own, this limited amount of benefit is the reason why we would determine that we could not move ahead with the IFPM project here. And that determination is then again further supported when you factor in the consideration of those additional resources that would be needed for this very long alignment and the very significant impact of closing the West Side Highway. So again, unfortunately, this is not a project that we can bring forward in the IFPM program. So if you have any questions or anything from the presentation that we gave last in October.
Yeah, I'm just going to jump in with a couple of just basic ones, like
Sure.
what is where did the feasibility analysis start and end, the northern point and the southern point?
Sure. So we looked all the way down here to, I did have the this is the, you know, where Battery Park City ends. Are you guys seeing my cursor?
Yes, we are.
Okay. So it's all the way down here to Battery Park City, and then actually it went up here to, I think this is West 11th. I'm not sure this image actually shows. yeah, so So it went all the way up to West 11th as a potential. That's where we would have had to tie off to, you know, reach the same ground level, elevation level as the low point.
Oh, I'm a little confused. I don't know if anyone else is, but, well, if we could just go, rather than going into the West Village, which certainly is a whole other part of the equation here, which, so let me just understand this. From 11th Street in the Village down to Chamber Street, there can be no interim measures. Because
Because with the 4 feet of additional, you know, putting 4 feet on top of the ground elevation there only stops this amount of water, this sort of purpley blue color. And within that area, the buildings that are touched by that purpley area, there were only 4 buildings that didn't have a higher elevation to begin with, or didn't have its own building level protection.
So basically, it wasn't worth the city's while because there weren't enough buildings to support the expense of doing this? Is that?
It's
the
not
sort of-
just the expense, it's also the cost of stopping the West Side Highway during a potential evacuation event, and the cost and the resources needed to deploy it in the just-in-time period when, you know, there are other sites where you would achieve more benefit.
Well, I don't want to monopolize the question answer here, and I know we don't have endless time here either, but thanks very much for the presentation. I'm going to open it up to others for questions. So Jeff Galloway?
I just want to clarify. So the deployable protections doesn't offer protection for the 100-year storm or anything like that. It offers sort of mild storms, the 15-year storm. And if I understand you correctly, so it would be essentially useless for a huge storm, but it would be valuable to some extent for a smaller storm.
Yeah.
And that value is limited because of the 33 buildings in that roughly 1 mile stretch that we're talking about here. All but 4 of them are already protected from that level of storm. And 2 of the 4 are undergoing some renovation that may result in their protection as well. So somewhere between 2 to 4 buildings would be protected, and the cost of which, so to speak, would be, you know, a deployable somewhat over 1 mile long that would have to be deployed just in time, closing the West Side Highway while people are trying to evacuate. Is that a fair summary of what your rationale is?
Yes, that's actually really, really excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Richard Corman.
Yeah, hi. So I also need some more clarification, if I could, Susan. On this same chart, what are all these these small white squares?
Those are buildings that,
And why aren't they then included in these counts?
because they're not touched by the flood extent. I know it's hard to see on this, but the engineers determined that you know, the water is not really touching. I guess this image isn't that
So
great.
that 7.5 feet
Yeah.
doesn't reach these buildings, anything beyond the ones that are
Right.
identified. So nothing inland
No,
is at risk at that level.
exactly.
That's what they're saying.
Yeah.
And
ground-
that's true. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say it's not really so visible to the naked eye, but the ground does slope up, you know, after Washington Street. I'm not sure all the different, you know, Greenwich Street. It really does. You gain at least 4 feet above that, you know, 4.5 feet.
Right. I'm well aware of that since my building was just above the level of Sandy, incredibly, just a block off. But what about on Canal Street, where I understood Canal Street flooded all the way through and then brought water back around.
Mhm.
I don't know, again, what the height level is, but what are the implications there?
Well, so you're talking about a Sandy level storm where it flooded all the way through.
Right, and what would happen on
S-
Canal Street for the 7.5 foot?
What you're seeing here. Just, I'm sorry, I'm
Okay.
right here.
And
Um,
explain one more time the 7.5 foot maximum. Why
Okay.
is that the maximum?
So at whatever is the low point along this corridor where they, I mean, this black line is what would have been a potential corridor. I mean, that's without a real formal design. But along this corridor of where we would have put IFPM, because that's, when the engineers look at it, they try to put it in the highest point possible to maximize the benefit, but they also have to look at the drainage infrastructure, and drainage infrastructure meaning, where the DEP outfalls can have backflow that would come up, or, communicate with each other and bring water into the other side. So whatever is the low point along this level here, when you add the 4 feet of the HESCOs on top of that, that gives you what is considered to be about 7.5 feet NAV D88. I don't like to use the word above sea level because we all know that's a changing term, but but that's like it's a standard measurement that was, every, I don't know how many years, 20 years or something, they may redo it, but that's the standard measurement for this. So that 7.5 feet is the amount of surge above the expected tide that would be stopped by IFPM in this particular area, because
And
wherever the lowest point is, that's what it equals.
so the lowest point is 4 feet on top of, or 3.5 feet on top of which you add the 4 foot HESCO.
Right.
That's how you get to 7.5.
Yes, yeah.
And the 4 foot HESCO, are there taller ones? Are there higher ones?
There are not higher ones, and the IFPM program, decided at the very beginning that they were not going to stack HESCOs. First of all, you need a much bigger footprint. It's you want to be sure you're not causing more damage than you're trying to stop. And it was decided it's a temporary program, that this was, something that we had to balance the cost, the aesthetics of it. I mean, if you wanted to build, you could probably build a 20-foot high pyramid of HESCOs, but in terms of putting out pre-deployed ones, I don't know that people on the west side would want those sitting there across the West Side Highway. So for whatever reasons, it's the 4 feet is the maximum for this program. That's why, a longer term plan, the hats perhaps, or, something else is obviously going to be more effective.
Well, as we just heard, the HATS is several lifetimes away.
I know.
And certainly not going to help me any, that's for sure.
I know.
Do any of these measures exist in Chelsea? Will they be in Chelsea?
IFPM, no.
Wow, so there's absolutely nothing along the west side.
There is nothing along the west side.
That seems a little critically absent.
All right.
Okay. Laura Starr, thanks.
Hi, Susan. Nice to see you.
Hi, Laura.
My question is a little bit tangential, but you mentioned the other issue of closing the evacuation route of the West Side Highway. And I just want the committee to know that evacuation route is going to be closed with the Battery Park City Authority's plan for the northern part of Battery. They're planning to close it anyway, which I'm not saying that to justify, to argue against your
Right.
HESCO barriers, but only to urge your group, since you're emergency management, we're concerned about evacuation routes out of Lower Manhattan in an emergency, and it seems like they're all being closed off. So I'm hoping you guys will take a look at that somehow and work with us on that.
I do hear what you're saying. I will come back and say that, where I don't have the details in my head, but the amount that they're closing in the lower part of the West Side Highway is, not where we would be closing it in two places. It would, surround the Holland Tunnel. It would, I think that this impact potentially would have more of an impact, especially when you're considering.
Right, because it's up higher, so it would affect more residents, right?
Right. Yeah. And at, at a certain point, the tunnel to Brooklyn.
The Brooklyn Battery
Hugh Carey
Tunnel.
Tunnel, the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel.
Yeah.
That's going to get closed. I mean, the Holland Tunnel would get closed at some point too. But these are all things that you're right. Once those are getting closer to being operational, it's definitely something that's being looked at.
Well, and it may, I know the city has been and the state have been resistant to the idea of raising the roads, but when we think about long-term planning, I think, we need to look also at the evacuation routes, and our roads going to be so flooded that we can't get out. Anyway, it's not the issue now of the HESCO barriers along the west side,
Right.
but it's just
I will
something
make the
for
plug
us
that
to think about.
Yeah, you shouldn't wait to evacuate. That's
Okay, thank you. Wendy?
Yeah, thank you so much for the maps. This helps a lot. I was just wondering, how do you know that the buildings have measures in place? Did you go to each of the buildings and say what you have? And then for the buildings that aren't protected or were built before then, are you sharing this study? Are you sending each of them a letter saying, hey, your neighbors are protected, but you're not? And we did a study, and we just want to let you know that even if it's a small 15-year storm, you're like in trouble. So maybe your building should do something because we can't do anything for you. Like, I know you'll say it in a much nicer way, but like how, I mean, maybe this is the community board, like, we should mail this to everybody that lives here, but I just feel like people don't know.
We have not done that. I'll take that back. I think that it might be something that we would want to partner with the mayor's office of, climate and environmental justice. But that's a good point.
If you spent all the money, you might as well share the results with the people that are going to be impacted.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. How much money was spent on this?
I'll be perfectly honest with you. It's a little hard for me to answer that because the way that we work with the engineers that we are tacking on to an EDC contract, it's a lot of different tasks get chunked together in the way that they sort of bill. I don't have in my head, I could get some kind of ballpark.
That would be great.
Get back to you.
Yes,
Okay.
thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay, Carrie Parker Davidson.
Just you said that a lot of those buildings, they're above the 7.5 feet, but a lot of Tribeca's vaulted. Did you take into account the vault spaces and the mechanicals that might be in those vaulted spaces?
Yes. The engineers did look around at that issue too. If you drive in this section, you'll notice a lot of this is renovated. A lot of this area is, been improved. So
It's sandy, basically.
That's accounting. Yeah, that's accounting for a lot of it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we have two members of the public, so we'll open it up. Brittany Ertz.
You guys hear me?
We'll give you, Brittany.
Yep.
Ah, perfect. Thanks so much. This is really informative. Thanks so much for presenting this. I just want to echo what Laura said about the Northwest Battery Park Resiliency Project that they're planning on cutting off the West Side Highway. And here in this study, it was seen as, that's probably not a good thing to do. As a resident of Battery Park that lives close to where that they would cut it off, I find it a little concerning that they would consider that. So I think it is a good idea to continue to look at raising the road or doing other measures. That's a comment. Then my question is on these assumptions, is the assumption that these buildings are flood proofing themselves? Is that what you guys found when you were going through the study?
So the 7 buildings that have some kind of their own flood protection have taken measures. They either have, they have there are different kinds of protections that are available, and they have taken it on themselves to get those for their building.
Okay, so that's seen from your guys' perspective as an acceptable means solution for those buildings, or just that's what it is. And
it is what it's all of these measures are temporary measures. That their measures, their building, the measures that we've seen on some of these buildings. Some of them are flood panel types. Some of them are other sort of deployable panels. We did not include anything where a building might have something like tiger dams, because there was nothing for them to show us for that, right? Would be packed away or whatever. So there may be some other buildings that have other measures in addition to what we saw, and what information we got from some of the owners. But they're not equivalent. I'm not going to say that they're all equivalent. I mean, I think we chose the measures that we use because of the confidence that we have in them, to the extent that they are, reliable, even as temporary barriers.
Got it.
But these buildings have some form of flood protection.
Okay. And Alice, Tammy, do you guys know if the Battery Park City Authority have surveyed the buildings in Battery Park at all in this way to look at the buildings and measures that they have?
I don't know, but this is not part of that area, but I couldn't answer that, but certainly we'll try to find that out for you, Brittany.
I will just say the buildings in Battery Park City are have the highest floor elevations of any place in Lower Manhattan.
Weren't they all built after 1984?
Maybe, probably, but
think
also
so,
they're
yeah.
and they're at a higher. They were built above, at a higher
Yes.
elevation.
I think some of them
Yes,
are
and no.
after.
No,
Yeah.
no, they weren't built before 19. Many of them were built before 1984.
Oh, really?
I think it's some yes, some no on that. I don't know which
Okay.
ones.
Could-
But
could-
thank you. Thanks for this presentation.
Thanks very much. Therese Cruiser, hi, welcome.
You can unmute, Therese.
I think so now. Yes, you can hear me?
Yes.
Yes, thanks.
Okay. I just wanted to comment that I'm not looking at your map at the moment because you changed the graphic, but I'm actually, yes, there we are. I'm actually sitting in one of the buildings right now as we talk that is on your map. It's at the corner of Watts and Washington Street. That's where I'm sitting right now. And there are a few things about this that really worry me quite a bit, actually. First of all, your assumption was that the waters of a 15-year storm would not go any further east than this line of buildings. However, in Sandy, up to Greenwich Street got badly flooded because it's built on it's landfall. Yeah.
Sandy was a 100-year storm.
Yeah, I realize that. Still, here's the problem. This whole area was built on landfill. It's not just that it's, good old solid granite or whatever we've got under parts of Manhattan. It is not. Moreover, as somebody mentioned earlier, Canal Street has its own particular issues and flooded terribly badly and really killed a few people as the storm rushed out of there again. So I just want to bring that up because I know that's to be true. And I don't know that the assumptions that your engineers made about this area are exactly as well founded as I would have hoped. I also want to say something else about this. The building where I live is a brand new building. I'm looking out right now as we talk on the interior courtyard of this building. 1, 2, 3 sides of this are part of a new building in which I live, which was opened 6 years ago. The fourth side is an old warehouse. It was built in 1883. It is actually flush with the three. It was part of the walls, 2 of the 3 walls of our new building. So if that building is unprotected because of its age, and our little building is more protected, it still is not going to keep water out of where I'm sitting right now, to the best of my knowledge. I wonder if these kinds of factors have been considered, because throughout this area, I just want to say, finishing a sentence, throughout this area, there are a lot of old buildings that are contiguous with newer buildings.
So again, newer buildings were built to the code for flood resistance. And the building, the engineers and et cetera should have made sure that the envelope of your new building was not going to be impacted by that kind of issue, whether it's from an adjacent building or whether it's from, groundwater, et cetera. Going back to your questions about the flood extent and the assumptions, so just to be clear, a 15-year storm, meaning that the talking about a 15-year storm and 7.5 NAV-D88 in terms of how much surge is to be expected, that's not just our engineers' assumptions, that's a standard information of the flood extents that we have from the National Weather Service and from the National Hurricane Center. The water in a 15-year event is not going to go as far as the water in a 100-year event, which is what Sandy was. So to look at what happened during Sandy in comparison to this, it doesn't tell us what would happen in a 15-year storm. I'm sorry, I'm not answering that very well. In a Sandy type event, if we put HESCOs and Tiger dams out in this area, a Sandy type event, the water would just come right over the top of those measures. And you would have the same flooding that you had before from Sandy.
Okay, there's one final thing I'd like to say about this. I've lived in this building a little more than 6 years. Never once has there been any discussion with tenants and residents about what we would have to do in the case of a storm. I think that sort of thing should be mandatory. It should, in other words, the building should have to do something so that people know what to expect and what to do about it.
You should definitely, if you're renting, you should talk to your landlord. If it's you're owning, you should talk to your building management and have them develop some programs for you.
I'm not just
Definitely.
talking about this building. I happen to live in one of these buildings, but I believe that this would be a problem throughout this area.
It's a good point, Rose.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Tammy?
Thanks. I wondered, in your study, because you go along the entire length of the Hudson River Park Trust, what kind of integration or dialogue was had with potentially having some interim flood protection measures for the park itself, instead of looking at 9A and other things? What kind of conversations, if any, were had there?
So we didn't progress to that point of having conversations with the trust. But again, the corridor of where we would need to place these is driven not only by the topography, but also by the drainage infrastructure. And we did walk through the park side. We walked and looked at all the different, could we put HESCOs in the planted area? We'd have to talk to Hudson Trust. We did a lot of walking along this area to look at potential locations, and we did a lot of consideration that it would be a lot of negotiation and a lot of coordination with them, but we didn't progress to that point because we're not taking it any further.
It does.
Are you asking if we would protect the park, just the park?
Well, it does seem to me a missed opportunity because it's not only about protection of the park, but you're also looking at protection of the bikeways and the greenways, and then potentially protection of 9A, which is an evacuation route. So from my particular perspective, looking at it as being turned down because of the minimal number of potential buildings does not negate the flooding issues and the fact that you will have an evacuation route that is unpassable potentially.
So when the surge comes, it's at a point in the storm when no one should be continuing to evacuate. The surge is coming in the moment of the storm and is too dangerous to be outside. So again, I'm not joking, people shouldn't wait. If there's an evacuation order or if you think you're in danger, you know, an evacuation should happen sooner.
With all due respect, having lived here
so-
through 9/11, the blackout, Sandy.
And those are not the
everything
same
else.
type of events as a tropical storm where an evacuation order is given several days in advance.
I'd love to see that an orderly evacuation that would make this need moot, but thank you.
Okay, thanks. We're going to have to close this part of the agenda items off pretty soon. So I take one more. I see one more hand up. David Sheldon, thanks. And then we will complete.
Okay. Am I here? Yes.
Yes.
I want to second this notion of perhaps some sort of building by building communication of the risk that each building is in and what measures they might take to alleviate it. That I think could be productive. Two, I like the idea that individual buildings should have some kind of orientation for their tenants as to what measures they might have to take in the event of a 15-year storm. And when I hear, I am going to repeat myself, when I hear speaking of evacuating an island, I am always reminded that the way one often does that is by boat. Would it be economical to perhaps deal with some of the bulkheading along the Hudson such that in an emergency, that those bulkheads would be available for that purpose? That's what I got to say. Thank you.
I'm not sure if that's a question for us, but it would be, again, something that I think would have to be incorporated into a bigger plan. But I can certainly take that back as one of the comments from this evening.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Susan, for the presentation and for helping answer some of the questions. I think from what I'm hearing, this would be a topic that definitely should be taken up at the Quality of Life Committee going forward, probably to look into more emergency protocol. So I think that's something we should keep working on with you. And
I'm sure you're aware that, we do emergency preparedness programming for people to talk about their individual preparedness, but that's something that's always available. And if anybody has any other questions, if you want to reach out to me, I'm always happy to try to answer.
Thanks very, very much. Really appreciate the presentation and the help.
Thanks, Susan. And we like
you.
the artwork on the Hasco barriers.
Oh, thank you.
Okay.
All right,
So
everybody gets go bags.
What?
Everybody go
I was
get
just
go
gonna say-
bags. That's a
One thing
Okay.
we just did a new beautification in Atlantic Basin, if you have a chance to look at those. And we are going to look at hopefully doing some replacements in South Street Seaport soon. So thank you. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Thank you for coming. Good night.
Okay, so we're up to the end of our agenda. Third item, and thank you for those folks who waited out for this item. So the third item, we'll look at Wagner Park as a lens for future resilience projects for waterfront parks in Lower Manhattan. I don't know if I'm ahead of you, Lucian, when you want to pull up the screen that's going to have that. It is my distinct pleasure to introduce our presenters tonight, who are the original designers of Wagner Park and its pavilion, which was completed in 1996. Lucinda Sanders from Olin Studio, a world-renowned landscape firm, was the lead landscape architect for the design of Wagner Park, joined tonight by her associate Demetrios Storinis and Jeffrey Burchard from Machado and Silvetti Architects, the architects responsible for the design of the award-winning pavilion. Olin Studio were also the landscape architects responsible for the design of the Battery Park City Esplanade and part of the team responsible for the Battery Park City Master Plan. As many of you know, Community Board 1 has engaged with the Battery Park City Authority over many years on the community's behalf and is on record in several resolutions advocating that the original park and pavilion remain. Wagner Park is now closed and is to be demolished and rebuilt as part of the Battery Park City Authority's current resiliency plans. CB1 has asked the designers here tonight to provide a history of the park, its resiliency measures, and to review any alternatives that may help inform public engagement and decision-making in the future as the community moves forward with the review of the city, state, and federal resiliency plans for Lower Manhattan. Tonight's presentation also offers us a welcome opportunity to pay tribute to the history of this extraordinary park and give heartfelt thanks to the park's extraordinary original designers. Cindy, take it away, and thank you very, very much.
All right, thank you. Thanks for everybody's patience. So we wanted to do a couple of things tonight, one of which was to take you through a little bit of the history and culture. Jeffrey and I will talk about that, about Battery Park City and Wagner Park. Demo will talk a bit about the science and progress toward a greater understanding of this ever-changing sea, of our interpretation of our future. We'd like to spend a little bit of time talking about the EIS process and what happens and what's going on, and then understanding and interpreting options. So let's go ahead and get started. Of course, Wagner Park, we were delighted that so many people have enjoyed it, that it has been a place of tremendous significance in the city, and we are forever thankful that people loved it and took care of it so well. Next. This is who is with you tonight. Jeffrey in the upper left, Demo in sort of lower center, and myself in the upper right. I'm probably the only one on the screen tonight who has this immediate history with so much of Battery Park City. Next. Go ahead. So this is a drawing that I actually worked on as I was coming out of graduate school at the University of Pennsylvania, where Bob Hannah and Lori Olin were my professors. This master plan of Battery Park City, the 92 acres of mixed-use development, really was led by Alex Cooper and Stan Eckstad at the time, and Hannah Olin. We were the landscape architects, and I go ahead next. I do want to say that Battery Park City just has such a storied history. It really is held up as this incredible model of urban design, and there's so many good things about it. Everything from the publicness of its waterfront, which is so important, to the way it connects to and answers the city to which it is appended, as well as its relationship to the water. And so we were the landscape architects who worked on the guidelines for the Esplanade in that very first phase. everything from the width of the walkways and the emergency systems and the lights, the beep holes. I mean, these were the things that I essentially grew up with through in the early years of my profession. The World's Fair benches, it's pretty remarkable. Go ahead, next. And so in 1991, 92 timeframe, Hannah Olin, Machado Silvetti, and Lyndon Miller, we were the three primary consultants who were retained to design Wagner Park, which is in that little red, I guess it's a pentagon or something down there, or octagon. I'm not sure how many sides it has, but it's down there in the corner. And Battery Park City was a very different place back then. These images on the right are what Wagner Park looked like. Its present use at the time when we found it was a helipad. It was one of these things that we called a blank slate. Like, what do you do there? And not many people were down there. So it was pretty novel and inventive. Of course, we knew the rest of Battery Park City was going to be built out, but there was a lot of opportunity here and interpretation. Next. I'm going to turn this to Jeffrey, but I do want to say that this kind of messy sketch in the lower right-hand side is a sketch that Lori Olin did. And that the statue was so important, and seeing that statue from the street was vitally important. Of course, the Esplanade can be, every place along the Esplanade, you can see the statue, but there was something very powerful and important about this frame, about the progression of moving through two elements into this incredible environment. So, Jeffrey.
Thanks, Cindy, and thank you everyone for giving us the time this evening. I did not have the good fortune to work on the original project. I'm the managing partner currently at Machado Silvetti and have spoken quite a lot with Rodolfo Machado, who was the lead principal on this project alongside of Lori Olin. And just to note that Machado Silvetti was brought to the project by Lori and David Emile, who was then the director of the Battery Park City, and on the sort of advice of Herbert Munchamp from the New York Times and the Walker art critic, to work on a project that elevated the cultural status of this point at Manhattan, which besides the Battery and of course some of the piers, is the closest view that you can get of the Statue of Liberty from the island. And this moment that Cindy's talking about the kind of gateway, was a way to celebrate this particular place along the Esplanade, along the waterfront, as distinct and truly unique along the coast. There are many places where you can get access to the coast along Manhattan. We know it. This was a attempt to, and a successful attempt, we think, to dramatize that moment, that connection, that interface between the city core and the statue. The next slide might be a little bit more about the specific design of the pavilion, which if you go on our website, there's some explanatory drawings and diagrams that are too long to get into now, but Rodolfo introduced with Olin an idea of a kind of architectural, a temple, so that would look back at the Statue of Liberty, and that the Statue of Liberty would look at, and that this temple, through a series of architectural abstractions, artistic abstractions that make something else, created this kind of monolithic pavilion, which is also, you can be seen as essentially eyes, face looking back at Manhattan to create a kind of a dialogue between, or looking back at the statue to create a dialogue between the Statue of Liberty and the city, which we thought was very important, again, at this moment. And I would just also say that specific to some issues of the material was chosen as this brick material to be reminiscent of the, again, sort of large scale infrastructure projects that made Manhattan, like the Brooklyn Bridge. Some of the shapes, the geometries, the textures of the brick themselves are taken from constructions like the Brooklyn Bridge. And it was designed out of masonry to be resilient in the saltwater spray that would sit, or that would come at it from the shoreline. Also, its location back towards the street is about that gateway entrance, but it's also about moving it back towards the street and away from the water's edge to further protect it from sort of the sea spray that would come off the coast. Cindy, do you want to jump? I think, the next slide, there's one more thing on the next slide, I think.
Sure.
The pavilion, you can go to the next slide, Demo, I think it's okay, or who's ever running the slides. The pavilion has a very tight relationship with the lawn that sits directly in front of it, and then the steps, and then the point or the apex of the esplanade there. All of these elements are in alignment, and they're aligned to the statue. And what this had meant to do, and still does today, is it creates a truly special place along the esplanade. The frame of the grass with the pavement around connected to the pavilion in line with the statue make this lawn not like any other lawn space, any other grass space along the esplanade or along the coast, but make this a special moment. It's almost a peaceful moment when you go here, even though kids can play, there's in this case many strollers, but it creates a special place that is related to this unique experience of the Statue of Liberty. Cindy?
That's great. As you're talking, Jeffrey, it brings to mind a couple of things about the importance of design in Battery Park City. When Amanda Burden was at the helm, and then David A. Meal, through those 2 periods, there were at least 8 landscape architects of renown who worked in Battery Park City. There are nearly 20 artists who are represented here. And I think I just want to underscore the love of design and the importance of design that people like Amanda Burden and David A. Meal brought to the table. It really is, you have a collection of extremely important places here. Kind of a museum, if you will, of designers. We can talk about the architecture, and I'm not talking about the pavilions here, but those very early buildings were speculative, and they perhaps were not, the best bits of architecture in those early days, but it was speculative whether people would live here or not. Okay, let's go next. Sort of meandered there for a bit, but so one of the things about the design that I want to talk about that's kind of novel here, as I noted, we worked with Lyndon Miller, who was a horticulturist, and she was very involved in the conservatory gardens up in Central Park. And we were interested in not doing something historicist like the top image, but what would happen if you took those same forms and deployed them differently and used them to shape space in a different kind of way. And that collage on the right is really kind of the result of that process, and the plant beds that you see framing the 2 lawn spaces on the right and left, or the south and the north, are part of that composition of that Jeffrey was talking about with the lawn and the pavilions. What's really important is that together as a team, we worked on these things, and You know, the stairs of the pavilions kind of swing out in the same way that these garden beds do, as do the allays. So these alignments were all very carefully considered. Okay, next. We just wanted to kind of take a look at this and sort of see it from a perspective that I think conveys that level of simplicity and elegance, and not something that is overwrought or in need of excessive maintenance. Next. So one of the things that we did when we were designing this park is we really thought about the plants, and they are all selected to withstand the salt spray and some level of inundation. So if you look at the gardens in the north and south, their horticultural matrix or their horticultural composition is more diverse. As you move next out to the water, you're going to see plants that are extracted from those more delicate gardens, if you will, and are the hardiest plants. So, and rather than something that's very diverse, it becomes more single species that are out toward the water. And these are the plants that can take inundation and can take salt spray. Now, one of the things when we were building this park, we sort of came into it in Battery Park City, and the Battery Park City Conservancy was having, would tell us these stories about inconsistent drainage in their parks, and couldn't we do something about it? And they started this process up in Rockefeller Park. What was causing that park to drain inconsistently? They were learning, learning how to make soils. And by the time it came to build Wagner Park, we actually worked with the authority and with the Conservancy and developed soil mixes that were specially draining. We excavated 5 feet of that inconsistent fill and put sand and sand mixes in here in order to create a more sustainable planting next and foundation for that planting. And so, this was always a big concern and is a big concern in urban parks. Like, how do you get people out access to the lawn after a rainstorm? Well, part of it is how you design these soil mixes, and that is exactly what happened here. People can get out on the lawn shortly after a rainstorm without compacting the soil because of the way the soil was designed. Lo and behold, that strategy is precisely what protected one of the things that protected Wagner Park during Sandy. Was very rapid draining park. Okay, next. I'm going to turn this over to Demo, but a couple of things. So we, I think what we believe that it's important for everybody to know the history of places before they're disassembled, if you will, because we think that that should be part of the evaluation process. But we also, we're living in a world where our understanding of it is growing. The science is changing. Our understanding of sea level rise is changing. And so we were very interested in what was happening with the flooding, what actually happened during Sandy to Wagner Park, and where was the threat coming from? So Demo.
Yeah, thanks, Cindy. Thank you, everyone. My part will be fairly brief, as you saw just earlier with Susan and her explanations about what the dynamics are of flooding and how waters relate to our coastlines. It's a dynamic and ever-evolving science that's also being refined as we work through. But there are also some understandings of what conditions we are used to now and how they change over time. So one of the big difficulties in expressing this is understanding that water and flooding and changes in climate are all a temporal problem. So we crafted this video, which hopefully you can all see. Starts to look at several metrics. One that we just passed is the mean high water. Knowing that this is in the Hudson River estuary and that it is a tidal condition, the sea level and essentially the water level actually changes on a daily basis. These two numbers here I'm going to get to in a minute, but these are projections from the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Association. It's a mouthful to say. But I'll share those in the next couple of slides. But these are the projected changes to the mean high water level in 2060. As you can see, if you look on the map, when we hit them, not much changes really in terms of the daily inundation. But as soon as you hit the mean high that was projected in 2017, you start to see these different flood pathways appear. What's really important to understand is how this happened during Sandy as well. So I'll stop for the most part, where you can see a lot of lower Manhattan being flooded and where the major flood pathways were. But Wagner Park was actually designed to withstand a 100-year flood back when it was first built. And you can still see that it was actually above Sandy levels during that time period. Moving on to the scenarios that we understand today, understanding them, that one very important factor here is that what we're looking at does not include a storm surge. This is purely looking at what mean sea level is. And to understand what those are in those scenarios, I'm actually going to read directly from the Sea Level Rise Technical Report issued by NOAA, which takes into account several factors. One is global mean sea level rise, regional changes in ocean circulation, changes in the Earth's gravity field due to ice melt redistribution, and local and vertical land motion. So it's a combination of factors that get into the refinement of where the water is today and where it's eventually heading. So in 2017, this was our understanding, that your essential sea level rise elevations, say, for instance, in the year 2080, will be at a height of about 6.2 feet. Understanding the modeling now and how it's been advanced, it actually is looking something closer to 4.3 feet. The reason for this, of course, is that these are not numbers that you could say are absolute, but they're actually giving you ranges and possibilities and what planning can actually look like. And so with that, turn it back over to Cindy in the IS process.
Okay, so I just want to acknowledge that this is one of the things that makes this problem particularly challenging. And we forget that these predictions are actually models of what could happen. And we believe that the threat is there. Please understand that we think something needs to be done, but I think one of the questions is what precisely is it? And you're all wrestling with this. All right, so a couple of things about the EIS process that we think it's important to.
May I interrupt, Ms. Saunders,
Sure.
for just a moment?
Sure.
The history is so valued and really appreciative. We really love the history of the park, as you know. But I'm curious to understand and to have you all make the connections. What I didn't hear in the history, and I'm hoping before you're done with it, is that you can speak to the DFEs and the modeling and things like that, using it as a roadmap, as we say, for the other parks in Lower Manhattan. So more than looking at resiliency and lessons learned, so we can use this information and extrapolate going on, because we have so many more parks that are in this process. And I'm sure, as you probably well know, Wagner is already been fenced off, and the project is the deconstruction project is underway. So I'm hoping that there's a connection. I apologize for interrupting, but I figured I would say that before you jumped into the EIS process, so we can really get historical information on, height elevations, storm surge, what it was, that kind of technicality details, so we can learn to how we need to view it to apply it.
Yeah, well, okay. We really were not going to go much further into the different elevations, but I think the key thing here, if the takeaway really is to understand that the science is being refined. I have listened to many of the presentations that have been made, and there is a rigidity around the data that is being used. So if there is advice moving forward, it really is to, I think somebody earlier talked about educating the public. I think it's incumbent upon all of us to stay on top of the science. And I think I would probably retain a couple of independent engineers to help give advice on this front. So that would be my takeaway there. I do want to talk a little bit about the EIS process because I think it is relevant to how you move forward. By law, the EIS must produce 3 different strategies for moving forward. And I just want to say that many times there is a throwaway strategy. There is a strategy that is preferred, shall we say, and then there is a strategy that could be viable, but is oftentimes not necessarily pursued with the robustness that it perhaps should be. So you all know the big U. Laura was part of this, her firm was part of this, working with BIG. A really important diagram, a really important drawing. It's not saying how to do it, it's saying pretty much that it needs to be done next. We also know that there are these different segments that are being undertaken, and the South Battery Park City Resiliency has its alignment pretty well determined, as you've noted at this point, and it's pretty inflexible, but the Northwest has some flexibility in listening to the last 2 presentations, those various options to exist next. However, I do want to note that there is a preferred option that is being put forward, and you can just click through these, Demo. I'm sure you all saw these the other night. This is what they call the proposed alignment. And so keep in mind that this is just a line. It's not a design, it's a line. And as we look at what happened with Wagner Park, that line became somehow a design, and the other lines became unimportant. So let's just go back to let's go forward to the goals here. And I think what I'm trying to convey, and Jeffrey, please step in, is really that these, I don't think anybody argues with these at all. Delivering, the purpose is to deliver this reliable coastal flood control system, preserve the open spaces to the extent possible, and to avoid or minimize disruption from flood events, from the draft EIS statement, the final draft EIS statement next. Likewise, the objectives, again, are these flood control, doing this in a responsible manner, preserving the character and the design aesthetic, and utilizing cost-effective solutions. I think the point that I want to make here is all of these things, how you do it, this doesn't tell you how to do it. How you do it is so subjective. As Jeffrey and Dimo and I were talking before, the point is the alternative that gets chosen is not inevitable, and the specific design of any of these reaches is not inevitable. There is a tremendous amount of design that is involved in each one of these decisions. And I have to say, you know, again, I was not involved in the 2017 when all this started, but that process of moving, I mean, they're pushing you through this EIS process. The comment period is extremely short, yet I feel that it's incumbent upon everybody to say, wait a minute, let's look at what the implications of each one of these are. Everybody is talking using words, and the only drawing that you have to assess anything from is a plan drawing with a red line on it. And that is simply not good enough, in my humble opinion. And honestly, what's going on in Wagner Park, it's really, for me, it's awakened everybody to really that everybody needs to address these threats. And what is the right response? Is a process, and it's not something that can be rammed through. And I'm, you know, again, I'm not suggesting by any stretch of the imagination that undue time is wasted, because this is urgent, but it should be done thoughtfully with the highest regard for future design of these spaces. Yeah. Jeffrey, did you want to add anything there?
No, I just think that, well, just one thing is that the EIS, as everyone knows, there are hundreds and hundreds of pages, and they're predominantly text, and where they're not text, they tend to be predominantly diagram. And the EIS is, the path towards the EIS tends to be the kind of highest level solution thinking first, and that usually comes pre-design. And part of the reason for that is because design takes a lot of time to vet out the specific possible outcomes of a particular alternative strategy. So there is both an EIS, or what we would think about as a kind of high level strategy question that comes before a community. And then there's also then the design of that strategy. And these are both very interesting moments to talk about the issues. And I will just say that, notwithstanding what's been said tonight about sort of the progress that's the fencing's up at Wagner Park, there's one conversation about where the barrier wall should go in this case. And then there's another conversation, which is once it's decided to go there, what is the design? And I think sometimes, or I would say oftentimes, these two conversations sort of get lumped into one, so that a community is actually maybe focused on the wrong conversation and not able to sufficiently participate in the places where they may have the most meaningful impact.
Wherever the wall or barrier ends up, it is a design problem. Okay, so just again, this, as you know, and this to me is important because you're all going to be facing this with the 7 reaches to the north. As I was saying, there's usually an alternative in an EIS that is a throwaway. And in this case, it's alternative 2 that was the throwaway. Nobody's going to argue with that. Nobody wants to rebuild the relieving platform. It's technically very, very challenging and very costly. So that leaves alternative 3 and alternative 1. And the case was made very strongly why alternative 1 couldn't work. And I think that's where designers can have input and should be having input. The question is here, how much pressure are they under to conform to perhaps another objective of a client? Alternative 3, as you know, was the alignment that was selected. But I would defy anybody to kind of say, you know, especially the layperson, what does this mean? What do these alternatives mean? The interpretation of these lines is not clear because there's so many different options for interpreting them. And so here we are again back at what Wagner Park was before the fences went up next. And this is, of course, the new, well, almost the new layout, I think less the ornamental gardens. And this central lawn, what's labeled the central.
Sanders, this is Lucian. I'm sorry, but you really must move to the design portion, because this is all kind of a closed door as we see it. So we really like to move to the portion.
I'm really trying.
I'm going to say, I
Sorry,
think
I'm
this is
trying to
really
make a point
valuable.
about design. And I appreciate that you don't understand or perhaps are following that I'm using Wagner Park to illustrate the very things that you need to be engaged with as you're talking about the other 7 reaches. It is a case study. I'm using it as a case study, not as a, gee, save Wagner Park. We're all beyond that here, right? And if you don't find it valuable, that's fine. If people are not with me, I get it. But really, it's a case study, and it's a valuable case study for each one of you to understand.
That's exactly what we hope for. I appreciate the expression and reminding folks of what the purpose of this is. I hope people can ascertain what you're saying, which seems very clear to some of us. And I apologize for the interruptions. I think, if you can look towards it forward looking so people can take from what you have done and what you looked at as alternatives, that was the purpose. That's exactly what I described at the outset. And thank you. So I think we can look to this future orientation and learn from this and sort of remove what I consider is not really helpful concern about everyone trying to go backward in time or revisit something or open old wounds. That is not it at all. This is an opportunity to look at this park, its history with the very designers who made it, as a tribute to it, to say goodbye to it, to allow for the designers to describe its history, to remind us all of where it came from, and to look forward to how anything that they've thought about could help inform us as professionals, experts, and designers of this entire area of the park and north of it as we move forward, which is imminent as well as we look at the Northwest. So I hope people in this committee and the public generally can appreciate that's what we're trying to do here tonight. Thank you.
Okay,
I would just jump in here, Cindy, and just mention again that the delta or the difference between the sort of the diagram that comes early, the 3-line alternative diagram that's been in sort of draft EISs for quite some time, and then again you don't see the final outcomes of a particular solution until relatively recently to this alternative 3-line. And what we see is that the outcome in this case of alternative 3 is the full demolition of the park in order to raise the green or the grass or the lawn or the park sufficiently so that a raised park acts as the flood barrier. Again, that is a viable strategy. We're not arguing that that's not a possible outcome. I think what we're trying to demonstrate is the difference between the kind of diagram that's explained and the outcome that's potential in that diagram, and the need to spend more time and for the design teams, especially in public space projects, to explain more thoroughly the potential outcomes of the alternatives that are chosen early. And so if you jump forward again to that rendering or the diagram, the outcome is the park is raised in order to act as the barrier. And from, Cindy could speak a lot to the landscape questions. To the architecture question, you then have to rebuild the pavilion out of necessity because the rest of the park around it is raised. And in rebuilding the pavilion, you end up with a building that sits higher relative to the Battery Place, but that also destroys the original axial entrance point from Battery Place into the park and through the through to the Statue of Liberty. So here on this top image, we're actually kind of standing on Battery Place, looking towards the opening, which had originally been the view of the Statue of Liberty, and now it's here. And for some inexplicable reason, there's even a tree placed in the space of the opening so that you further obscure the view of the Statue of Liberty. But instead of now the view and the plaza and the alley of trees, you're staring at the back door of a storage and service sort of garage door into a ground level service basement, which is just to say, again, this is this is now a version of alternative 3 that begins to illustrate more fully and more completely to a community board, to neighborhood association, the ramifications of those earlier diagrams, which are, they're difficult to imagine. Even architects and landscape architects don't exactly know all of the outcomes when they start to draw those lines. It requires the process of design to unpack what is possible. And we don't think this is the only possible outcome of alternative 3 either. There are other ways to design alternative 3 that wouldn't result in this outcome as well. It's not that the line has to move. That's something we've been focusing on in our alternative that Cindy will mention in a moment, but there are other ways to adjust the design. So even though the fencing may be up to demo and go with alternative 3, there may still or be time for input into the design resolution of that alternative. That's Cindy. Yeah.
Okay, so I think that this is more of a commentary from us on the process of coming to resolution. I will say, I'm sure by now many of you have seen the animations that were created. Those animations, to my knowledge, were not released until fairly recently this year. These animations are something in our estimation that should be part of that exploratory process in the beginning. I know everybody's concerned about views from first floor, second floor, third floor. People are concerned about access, what it looks like to move through a place where there might be walls. I think visualizing these elements is super important. And it's really one of my takeaways for you, and that is to request that, to require that. So I also need to say that the language of ambition of preserving and protecting is so subjective, how that is done, what that means, and to not take it at perhaps face value. All right. So, these are, some of you may have seen this already. We are not advocating for this anymore, but we are certainly saying, look, there was more than one way to look at alternative 2, which was discarded for a whole host of reasons, but in fact it's a way to thread the needle through the existing park if people were interested in retaining the park. And you all are going to have to face this exact same question at Rockefeller. Where does the wall go? Does the park that's there stay in place, or is there a new park that is built that is raised? And what does it mean to embody the spirit of the previous park? Those of us who are designers of the park and the pavilions might take question how well that was accomplished. So literally, if you go to the next image, I think there's another point that I'd like to make that I think is super valuable for each one of you to take away. The sections that are drawn here are, on the left-hand side, are the sections of the new park. The sections on the right side are the sections of the existing Wagner Park. We're in this mess because of carbon. It seems to me that one of the evaluations that needs to be made for every single alternative that is put forward is its carbon footprint. Which one has the bigger carbon footprint should be a consideration, because we shouldn't be just protecting our own assets. We should be thinking about the bigger global issue that we are in. The scheme on the left has a much higher carbon footprint, just by virtue of all the demolition and the import of materials. So as the different alternatives are evaluated, I am advocating for you to ask people to demonstrate the carbon footprints. And there are people out there who have carbon calculators. Pamela Conrad, who is a Loeb Fellow up at Harvard this year, and just came back from COP27, is one of the biggest advocates for measuring carbon. Next. Just these are the evaluations of each of the schemes, and how well they do against some community metrics. Next.
I'll just point out here, Cindy, that these particular alternatives were created by the Battery Park City Neighborhood Association.
Yes.
These are not the principles that came out of the EIS. I think this is quite also a useful point to make here. Again, to take with you, but I want to just zoom out for one moment on the context of it, which is that you've all seen it. You've been doing this long enough, right? The resources of an owner or a client or a public agency or a developer or a commercial client or an XYZ, right? The resources of the people doing a project far exceed the resources of a community or a community board to they're just, it's like David and Goliath games all the time, especially with community. And it takes usually particular set of individuals who are incredibly motivated, and then it takes resources, and then it takes special expertise to be brought on to first just understand what is being shown by these development teams. There's so many. I mean, I've been doing this for 25 years. Cindy's been doing it for about the same, and you know, it's a tremendous amount of knowledge that goes into being able to interpret these drawings quickly, and you know, and to sort of read through the different strategies that the EIS is you know, putting forward. And I think that the degree to which a community board can find pathways or assist community in pathways to garner the resources to effectively understand what they're being sold is, to me, so important. And in this case, the Battery Park City Neighborhood Association, who's very, you know, has a few members who are particularly attentive to this, were able to reach out to Cindy and myself and others, but also could put together their own list of criteria to assess the plan. So it wasn't just assessing the plan from the authorities' criteria, it was actually creating their own criteria for this particular project to assess. I think this was quite a useful tool to put the project on the community or the neighborhood's own terms rather than simply and only relying on the terms of the people who are bringing the project to the conversation.
I'm just gonna ask, do you have any other Olin created slides that can talk about the resiliency like you pointed out with the Northwest, or for LMCR, or for the battery, or for any of the other portions of any of the other resiliency projects that are waterfront parks in Lower Manhattan versus the BPCNA slide, which is not an Olin slide, as you mentioned?
I'm not certain what specifically you're asking for. Are you asking for projects or the work that, like this, sorry, that Machado did?
It is the understanding that I had was that we were using the lessons learned from Wagner.
That's right.
Lens on other parks. So
That's
this
right.
is from your architectural design and purview that were supposed to come from just the firm, right? And how we would, I understood you spoke about the alignment alternatives. Alternative one is always there's always one that's a sort of a crazy throwaway, which
Right,
we've seen. And then there's 2 and 3. So my question for you is, in resiliency projects, how many alignments would you normally hope to see when you are designing? Those are like the kind of conversations that I was hoping that we would have from here, not specifically focused on this, not slides from someone else, but an expertise from your organization about, we're looking at DFEs in these places that we're doing projects. We're working with, flood elevations and using landscaping in this manner to do more water direction or other things. More of a guide that the community and public can use when we're looking at LMCR, because we are looking at those. And those are at 30% design already, and the battery and the Northwest. So that's kind of where I was hoping to see information more along the lines of really something because you are the design experts and the landscape architects.
Actually,
Tie-dye Seaport.
Tammy, can I interject here, please? It's Laura.
Well, could we just have, Laura, before we open up for question and answer, and thanks, Tammy, I think people are eager to sort of have this future orientation. But do you want to speak to that point, Cindy? Or do you want to go on with question and answer?
Well, I guess a couple of things. One is we all know that urban environments pose a series of very unique kinds of challenges and questions. We have pretty extensive experiences around Boston, as well as working on the Pier 26 in New York. And those sort of examples and regulations and requirements are very specific. They are not national requirements. We are working in environments that don't require EIRs and EISs. And they are, when we make decisions with a client to let a park flood, that this is one of the aspects of a park that is so important to understand. I mean, this goes back to Olmsted 150 years ago. And so we are working in parks where this is just a non-issue. And there is a 60-foot elevation change in water. And the decision is that the park is going to be doing a lot of this hard work. So yes, we have plenty of examples. I don't have slides of that because we thought we were using Wagner as a case study. So I apologize if I misunderstood this pro bono assignment, with the hope that we could enlighten or share our insights. But we seem to have missed the mark, so I apologize for that.
Laura, I'm not sure quite what to say as an apology. I think that is unnecessary, but okay, that's my personal opinion. I a little surprised by the responses, but in any case, I just want to ask if you're finished. I know we do have to sort of close up shop, relatively soon and open it up to question and answer. Are you done with the presentation? Would you like to, do you have anything else you wanted to present, or should we open it up to question and answer now?
Well, we were just illustrating through Wagner Park that, like we said in the beginning, that the alignment of this flood protection is not inevitable. And once the alignment is selected, the design is not inevitable. There is more than one way to skin a cat, number one. Number two, that design should be prioritized here. Excellent design should be prioritized. And if people value an asset, there needs to be a voice that is put forward about valuing that asset. And again, I think this is, we're looking at Wagner Park, but you have 7 other reaches. And I've heard Kate Orff, who is a colleague of mine, highly respected individual, talk about this. She talked about South Cove, if the wall goes in one place, you're gonna have a wetland in South Cove. If the wall goes in another place, you might be able to elevate, but you're gonna have a new design. I mean, these are all decisions that need to be understood. And the only way they can truly be understood is if the alternatives have designs that are paired with them and they are no longer a line in the sand. So that's really my big takeaway. And, we've got this, you can just click through these demo very quickly, this alignment, it's possible to make a different kind of an alignment. It's possible to slightly modify designs. It's possible to take some of these walls that everybody's fearful of and turn them into art pieces or green walls. They don't have to be these ugly static things that people are fearful of. And so to me, it is the devil's in the details, quite frankly.
Just would love to add two things to what Cindy's saying. We could have drawn diagrams of other parks to illustrate it, but we're doing this for free. With regards to buildings or cultural assets that exist along the coastline, of which there are many. And there are cultural assets that are registered, and there are cultural assets that are part of the culture of a community, like the pavilions in Wagner. There are others around. There needs to be more of a distinction between the protection of those assets and the protection of the city of Manhattan, and a kind of a hierarchy placed on these issues. It appears to me that in many situations, these things are conflated, so that the protection of the pavilion is the same as the protection of Manhattan. I don't believe this is true. And so in the EIS that's written for Wagner in particular, and it could be written for others, it's said that the pavilions can't provide a sufficient barrier for the island of Manhattan. That's absolutely true. They're little pavilions. But we could allow the pavilions to flood and build another wall that would protect Manhattan. And again, this is specific about Wagner, but I think it's applicable to so many other areas that you're dealing with, that there are some things that can flood and some things that can't. And Cindy's talking about sort of the park versus the city. I'm talking about some of the architectural artifacts versus the city. And the other thing to think about, I think, is that Cindy hadn't mentioned was that, let's think about how uncertain the kind of models of climate change, sea level rise, storm surge are, and how they're changing with great frequency. And there's I think, higher likelihood that the condition is going to get worse than better. If we're rebuilding the coastline by demolishing everything that's there only to build it again higher? What happens in 10 years when we realize we should have been 2 feet higher, right? When we should have been a little bit higher. Whereas in this particular version, the strategy of a wall can be built so that you can just extend the wall higher, right? So that you're not rebuilding a whole park every 10, 20 years, wholesale coastal redevelopment, but that we're thinking more strategically about what if it gets worse? How do we continue to be able to ourselves after we've spent, I live in Boston, right? Big Dig basically ruined Boston's ability to do large scale infrastructure projects for decades because it was spent the way it was and the project went on the way it was. We need ways to be able to continue to respond to the issue as we understand it more, rather than to sink all of the costs up front to a partially understood problem.
I'll only add to Jeffrey's point that when you look at these problems, you look at them in context with one another. Cindy referenced work we're doing in Boston. And when you begin to look at coastlines or any water body for that matter, you have to look at what that water body is doing as a system. One of the things that we were showing in the animation earlier was that you're looking at flood pathways that enter into the city. And to Jeffrey's point, strategically, you have to look at what actually is required to protect the city versus protecting someplace in isolation. And if you start moving investments around or moving money around in such a way that you're conflating the two, you then lost your ability to actually effectively protect where you need to and manage where you need to versus making something.
Can I interrupt?
Yes, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I'm the co-chair of this. You're actually talking to us who I've been in meetings for 4 or 5 years on this. We've raised so many of these things. We are not the Battery Park City Authority. To your point, I just find this too long. I find this, I'm sad about so many things about this project. You're not understanding your audience at all. We don't write the checks. We're advisory. We're part of the neighborhood. I've gone to so many meetings on this. I find this, we have never given, I don't know. I have to stop and step away. I feel this is very insulting to us, many of us who have raised questions that you're raising, things that have come up in the past, decisions that have been very difficult that we certainly, I agree with some of the things you've come up with. We raised them, we put them in resolutions, but you move forward. But I feel like you don't know who you're talking to right now. So I just will ask you very kindly to wrap it up. I know I'm not the chair, so I'm sorry. This is too much. We don't give this much time to other people.
Look, we're terribly sorry we offended anybody. We were invited to come and talk to the group. We're terribly sorry. We didn't ask to come and speak to you. So.
Yeah, I'm really sorry for the outburst. I'm sorry. People are entitled to say what they want.
And we're not paid either, by the way.
Excuse me, Wendy. They were given a half-hour time slot, and there's now a question and answer period. So I offer that up. If people have comments or questions, this is a great opportunity to speak to designers about the Battery Park City plans of the Northwest, which they're following, and lessons learned. That was the point of tonight. And I think they've done a great job in doing it. And I thank them for having reviewed so much of what was in the past and what we can learn from going forward. I did learn from it, so I hope others did as well. I open it up to Laura Starr.
Okay, well, first of all,
Laura.
Cindy and Jeffrey, wonderful, wonderful presentation. And, Wendy and Tammy and Julie and I actually found it extremely valuable to hear this perspective on this. And oddly, the most valuable thing I think that they showed was the matrix from the community ad hoc group, because I wish that we had, I think that we should do a matrix like that on all of these projects. And I think it would really highlight what are the priorities. And I don't know, in the David and Goliath situation we've been in with the Battery Park City Authority, if it would have had any influence, because to Wendy's point, we did raise all these things, and to some other people's points, they that the alternative with the wall that Lucinda is showing, they didn't consider that at all. Like, we asked them to consider so many things, but basically they wanted a new restaurant, and we all know that that's how the project started. And so, we never even really went through the exercise of what are the priorities here. And even now, the South Battery Park City, the project in the north, Battery Park City is the highest land in Lower Manhattan. They don't even need to do that project relative to the rest of Lower Manhattan, but they have the money and the power to do it. And they also don't have to go to the Public Design Commission. So when Lucinda says, design is important and we need to think about the nuance of design, it is really just us, because there's no other design accountability that that these guys have to go through. So we do need to really stand up for design and look at the details and not let them railroad this through our process.
Thanks, Laura. Jeff Galloway.
Thank you all for the presentations. I've lived in Battery Park City since 1982, so I've had the pleasure of observing a lot of your and your predecessors' handiwork as it was put into place. I mean, Battery Park City is beautiful, and I thank you and your organizations for contributing to that. I echo part of certainly Wendy's sentiments, but try to be more polite. And I don't mean that Wendy was not polite. I think, just speaking for myself, we have struggled with exactly the considerations that you have articulated. Where we end up at the end of the day on those considerations, I think reasonable people can disagree. Interesting thought experiment. If you were designing Wagner Park today and you had a DFE of 20 feet, would you build it the way that it is today? Would you build it to flood and build a wall around it, separating it from the community? I don't think so, but that's not how it was built. And I take your point that when you have an asset, there is value to that asset, even if you would never build it that way today. And I think a community can make a judgment. Do we want to preserve that asset and wall it off from the community, preserving a handful of the views? Or do we want to say, let's elevate the park? And I take the point of, DFE of 19 feet may not be good enough. We're going to elevate the park in another 25 years and start all over again. Those are tough judgments. And I don't think that the community board has made wrong judgments, or the individual members have made wrong judgment. Reasonable people can disagree. I have to say that my sense is the Battery Park City Authority is making those same judgments in good faith. And we may come up with different preferences based on that. But I think your articulation of the considerations is very valuable, particularly as we consider the Northwest Battery Park resiliency, where you have a lot less space to work on if you're going to get a DFE of 18, 19 feet, whatever it is up there. And it's even worse over on the Seaport FIDI, where the existing condition is at a much lower elevation. So I thank you for the presentation. I think, just speaking for the community board, we take those considerations into account, and I'm sure we'll have lots of arguments as we balance the consideration. So thank you.
Thanks, Jeff, and thanks for thanking the presentation. I think they deserve that, and I appreciate your comments on our behalf. Okay, Richard Corman.
Yes, I also want to start by thanking you for the presentation. I really actually feel that we owe you an apology. You have taken your time in good faith and for good purpose to come here and talk to us on an issue that you take very seriously. And clearly, from everything that you've heard, we take very seriously as well. This obviously is a very charged subject, Wagner Park. No one's going to walk away from that fact, and you just got some of the brunt of that, which I think, frankly, is unfair and inappropriate. And I want to thank you again for taking the time to be with us and apologize for anything that was disrespectful to you. I, for one, recognize that things that Jeff said and even some of what Wendy said. Yes, we've been working on this for quite a few years. But frankly, some of the things that you said tonight were very helpful to me. So I'm going to say I got a lot out of this. And number one, it was the idea that right up front, we as a community need to spend the time and really understand the implications of all of these options and the options within those implications. Those were the clear messages that you were giving us tonight. And those are messages that weren't exactly that clear to me in terms of how we go about these evaluations of these plans. I think we generally find ourselves partially because of the process, but partially because of our level of understanding. We find ourselves reactive and a step behind, and we need to find ways of getting ahead of these issues and in front of them in a way that we can really understand the kinds of decisions and the implications of those decisions. So for that alone, I thank you for coming here tonight, and I appreciate what I've learned about it and what we can and how we might be able to apply these going forward. I personally did not expect you to be presenting the other options for the other parks, at least not yet. But again, I appreciate the time that you spent and the information that I got out of this.
Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. I think that's it from the board. So I'm going to move down the list here to Brittany Eretz.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, thank you.
All right, I just want to say thanks to Alice for bringing them on, and just a huge thank you to Cindy, Jeffrey, Demo, the whole team. They didn't just come here tonight and put this presentation together. They've spent hours and days and hours and days of their time, totally pro bono, just out of the goodness of their heart to help our community, because they see what's happened to us in Wagner in the South, and it's wrong. It's absolutely 100% wrong. We have been gaslighted as a community, and I see the same thing happening in the Northwest. And I just, I can't even express how grateful I am to them, to their teams, just for answering our call and our email to help, and the amount of dedication, thought leadership. It really is a warning for us of what's going to happen next and what's going to happen all over Manhattan and other places if we let developers like AECOM come in and rip up our parks and say it is for resiliency. We need designers there, involved, engaged, and we need the public there understanding all the different options that are out there. I can't reiterate my heartfelt thank you for them. And I also have to, I was cringing listening to some of the comments, quite honestly, from the board here. And I think that I also would like to apologize. And our community owes you guys a debt of gratitude, a huge gratitude for all the work that you've done for us.
Okay, thank you, Brittany. Maggie Dalal.
Just also want to say thank you to the designers for coming on. And I had two quick comments. One partially commenting on what Jeff said before. I live in South Battery Park area, and we had a PTA vote at PSIS 276 last week to support the alternative design. And we had 91% of the PTA membership vote to support the alternative. So I just wanted to let the board know that there is widespread community support, at least in South Battery Park, for the new plan. And the plan, besides having community support, is flexible and much more affordable. And so I think those are things to consider when moving forward. But I just, and also responding to Wendy's comment before, she was saying CB1 doesn't really have the power over this process. And I guess my question is, the alternative plan was brought to the community board and several other local politicians and the community as well. Why have we not heard any response to this? Why, Tammy, you're saying this plan is done, it's over with, the fences are up, they haven't broken ground. Like, if you guys could let us know, what's going on. Why is this dead in the water? The second thing is just echoing what Brittany just said. I think it's a problem when the contractor is given the job of designing the park. AECOM has large control over a lot of contracts in this city, and they have a vested interest in making the project larger and more expensive. So to me, it is a huge conflict of interest. I don't know how there wasn't, and I talked to Nick Swardone about this, that there should have been multiple designers coming to the board and whomever and presenting alternative plans, and that should have been vetted. But when they did a very preliminary job and then it went to AECOM and AECOM is the one doing the design, it's a problem. So, I think moving forward, that if there's a way to change that process as well for the North, that would be great. Thank you. Thank you, Alice.
Thank you, Maggie.
Alice, I'm going to respond because Maggie asked me directly a question.
Okay, certainly.
Maggie, what you're talking about is an RFP process for competitive bids for different designs and things like that. That is something you can certainly speak with the BPCA about, the RFP process that they used. But they set forward, if you look through the RFPs, a certain set of guidelines that they wanted and metrics and measurements, and then they chose from the purchase process. It's a fairly standard government process. The only time in my entire public service life that I have ever seen anybody even potentially open conceptual drawings of what an RFP submissions look like was very recently for the Climate Center on Governor's Island. And if you had an opportunity to go see those, you saw some conceptual drawings that considerably none of the RFP holders are forced to use. So what they show the public may be 125% different than what gets built, but it shows you the direction and intent of theory and general design of where they were thinking. And that is the only time I have seen that. We were not allowed to know in that process because it, again, in most RFP processes, you know who the final three choices were, but you had to look at the submissions blindly. And the public wasn't there to opine on, we like column A, but more of, here are the things we do like, here's things that we want to see a little bit more of within each concept. But I've never, in most of the public life, we didn't see that, and we are not seeing it with the FiDi Seaport plan. We did not see that with the Brooklyn Bridge Esplanade. We did not see that with the Battery Wharf, which is a city project. We have not seen it with anything that the Port Authority did for sealing up any of the tunnels, or the MTA did with any of the subways. We've not seen that anywhere else.
Okay, thank you. Dan, I'm not sure I don't have a last name here, but Dan. And then there's just three people after Dan.
Thank the designers for taking their time to help the community, A, come up with an alternative, but B, understand what has happened. I personally found it probably the most valuable thing of many hours of meetings I have likewise sat through, and I'm taken aback that anyone would find 45 minutes of that presentation to be a waste of their time. But I guess my question is, given that the structure of the BPCA. It's reporting into the state. And it seems to me that pressure needs to be applied in a largely political fashion. Whether it is a fait accompli or not, which I hope it is not, and Fences is not a broken down, would CB1 issue a written resolution in support of the alternative plan? If not to help protect Wagner, then at the very least to let the public know that we feel we have been gaslit, to use Brittany's term.
Dan, the community board did actually look a few months ago and asked for support or asked the question whether or not they wanted to support the idea of postponing and looking more carefully at the alternative. That did not get a vote of yes. So we did entertain that, but tonight's meeting is an allowance for the public to, see some of this work, which of course our electeds have seen and commented on, as well as actually Battery Park City authorities. So this is an opportunity for the public, and this is a recorded meeting, to have all of these plans out there, as it were. But this is not something that the community board was writing a resolution on. Okay. Victoria Fariella, welcome.
Thank you. So first, I want to say thanks so much. Thank you so much for the amazing presentation. I learned quite a bit. Alice, thank you so much for guiding us through this very emotionally charged topic. I think there's, I don't want to take up too much time, but I did have a couple of questions. And again, this comes from my ignorance and lack of background, professional background in design and architecture. And so I have two questions. The first one was if you could just speak a little bit more to the carbon footprint of the destruction of parks and what that does to us and how that's costly both on a financial level, but also obviously on a environmental impact level. And somewhat related to that, one of my big concerns is the exposure of South Battery Park City during the construction time. And is there any way to actually protect Battery Park City if there is no park there in the interim?
Thanks, Victoria. That seems to be a question rather than a statement, so I leave it to you all to answer.
So with regard to the carbon question, this is something that would need to be measured. And the new construction would have a carbon cost, both in the construction itself, but also in the transport and making of new materials. Again, the design is not ours, and I don't have the calculations at my fingertips, but there is an enormous amount of fill that is going to be imported into this park. So lots of vehicle trips, the materiality, the addition of new concrete. So we know that it's one of the most carbon intensive materials. So that is something that can be measured. In addition to which, the demolition of the trees that do have stored carbon, this is going to be another factor. And I'm not saying that new projects shouldn't happen at all, but it does seem that it might be a consideration for anybody undertaking projects in the future. And while it's not regulated today, I can imagine that it will be something that will be regulated in the future.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah, the carbon footprint point is well taken. It's something that we're going to all have to be looking at really carefully, certainly on Governor's Island, and it's something that I hope this committee will be looking and drilling down on a lot in the coming years. So thank you for bringing that up. That's really germane to the future orientation of projects that we should be looking at very carefully on that question. I'm not sure if we can get this right. Kleja Bega?
Did you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, first of all, Alice, I would like to thank you for inviting the designers to speak to this meeting. I would also very much like to thank Sydney and the team for doing this. We are so fortunate to have them, to volunteer their time and hear them share their very profound insights in what works best and how to approach such projects. I have to say, I've learned more listening to their presentations than I've learned in any of the previous meetings and in any of the BPCA presentations that they've put together. Another comment I have is that this is a community board. Keyword community. So as a community member who has been through many of these meetings and has heard many people speak with different levels of expertise and knowledge and fluency, I am insulted that some members of the board feel insulted. I would like to apologize to Sydney and the team for the interruptions. And my question is, what are they afraid of? Why can't we hear what went wrong with Wagner and Hyde can't be fixed? I hear a lot of hiding behind procedures and process. And my comment is, it's not over until it's over. So I think the board and any politicians who may be listening do need to take a stand where they stand on the alternative design. Take a stand, and then we can worry about the process later. Thank you.
Thank you. Kelly McGowan?
All the comments about, thank you to Alice, thank you to the community board for listening to this presentation, and thank you to Cindy and Jeffrey and the team for working pro bono and with such passion and love for this place. It is always amazing when you're in the lap of the masters, and these guys are masters, and we've all lived and enjoyed the works of them for the past 30 years or more, right? And being a lifelong New Yorker, I've always wondered, what was it like in 1963 when the decision to demolish Penn Station, which kicked off the preservation movement in this country? But what was it like to be in the room? How did that actually happen? And I think I now just have a glimpse into that. Not that the community board is at fault, not that anybody's at fault. The fault lies with the people making the decision. I know you guys have been working tirelessly for years trying to get them to change their mind, but let's focus where the problem lies. We've been given no choices, no alternative. There's been no hard look, no presentation. I understand, Tammy, you're right. This is normally how governments operate, but it's not how they should operate, and it's not how they operate when the community demands it. And the case in point was the Essential Workers Monument last year. They tried to do the same thing, and we forced them to give us alternatives, right? And those alternatives, if they were enacted, would have been satisfactory to the community, or they wouldn't have happened. So I personally fall in the camp of, it's never too late to do the right thing. And I appreciate everybody who is diligently in the community tried to get the authority to do the right thing. And I'm mostly appalled at our politicians who are supposed to represent us, who have not really fostered the ball and pushed it forward. And let's hold them accountable, because this will happen again, right? And I just wanted to say one other thing is that there's rarely in this city do you have such a right answer to stop doing the wrong thing. I was glad to hear that Maggie did a poll and 98% of people supported the alternative. That's my anecdotal evidence by walking around. Everybody wants an alternative. Everybody wants to do the right thing. They want resiliency, they want protection, but they also want the park. And there's no reason we can't have both. And the only reason we can't have what we need in this community is because the authority has refused to listen to the community, they listen to the consultants, they listen to the contractors, and they don't listen to the community. And they've gaslit us for 5 to 7 years. And it is unacceptable. And I know people want to move on, but you can't move on. We're going to be looking at the Madison Square Garden instead of the original Penn Station for the rest of our lives if we don't do something.
All right.
So, thank you.
I've been counseled that I should be keeping this on track in terms of looking at comments to sort of look forward. So thank you. MES is the next speaker. We have, I think, 3 more. Have, I think, one from who hasn't spoken on the from the committee, and we can wrap up for the evening. So MES, thank you, and try to keep it on topic in terms of the lens that Wagner Park has provided in looking at the future.
I'm requesting for MES to unmute, but they're not unmuting.
Okay. So I think the next person, we can wait for them then. In the meantime, Greg Scheinland, and I don't know if Greg is here.
Hello?
You're unmuted.
Oh,
Hello, Greg, you're on.
Greg, you can unmute.
can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I'm sorry for my mistake. A couple of things. First, I want to thank them for the presentation because if nothing else, it makes us all a better advocate with all of this information, right? If not for Wagner Park, which many of us still think perhaps there's a better solution, certainly for the North Project. And I think accompanying that is the fact that I realize some people think that maybe it wasn't necessary or they felt insulted by it. But what's happening is you're seeing a community being very involved, asking for more information, helping these experts come to present information. And I really think that needs to be applauded. It's not meant as a criticism. It's meant as something to enlighten everyone and to enhance the discourse. And I hope that gets encouraged. And last, I think there is a solution, at least for the north part, which is something I've been suggesting for a while and something that's been done in the past, and there's some precedent for it, which is why not the community board pass a resolution and the rest of us continue to advocate for a committee, meaning we can have the experts, we can have the contractors, but why isn't there a separate committee similar to what they did with the Essential Workers Monument? And for people who don't know, it's the same thing they did for the Irish Hunger Memorial when that project was stalled. They had a committee that consisted of experts and the contractors and people that were going to actually execute. They also had a committee of people that were involved in the community, Battery Park City Authority people, and there was a lot of interaction. People such as Jeffrey and Cindy would be on one of the committees that would help the interaction, that would help do exactly what they were suggesting, which is being translators between and being advocates between David and Goliath, helping people to better understand. And I think that would be a wonderful process, a wonderful solution, open communications, open discourse, and allow for the community to feel like it has greater input in whatever result comes, instead of feeling of very often that there's a dictation by somebody with all the power and all the information, giving us a board, a drawing, and asking us to sort of throw tomatoes and throw comments and hoping that they'll stick, or what happened at the last meeting, taking yellow stickies and putting it on a board and being told that somehow they're going to be incorporated into the decision-making process. That feels kind of light in terms of the seriousness of the type of project and the effect that it's going to have on the community. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Okay, okay. So this is going to be the last one from the attendees. This is Barbara Ireland, who has not spoken yet. And
This is Barbara.
thanks, Barbara. I'm sorry. I was just receiving a lot of text. I wasn't sure. I'm just reading something. Sorry. Go ahead. Excuse me. Hello?
Barbara.
Okay, now I'm on. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time. Cindy, Jeffrey, thank you very much for your insight. One of the things that this brought to me is I have gone through the plans of Wagner and the other sites. Numerous times have I gone through the fly-through and seen the demo of the Wagner Park. Whenever you go slowly through those plans, and then Cindy, you made me realize that you go slowly through these plans and you see trees and blockage and no views. And if we don't stand up now, we are not going to have expert designers place those new trees, the benches, and the sight lines. How, as a community board one, going to help us make sure that the demolition doesn't leave us with the aerials that we see in the plans that are being presented?
Okay. I think that's somewhat rhetorical, but I don't know. Bob Schneck.
Okay. I would like to say that I moved into Battery Park City 30 some years ago. And my original impression was to fall in love with it. And I had never seen a community that was more beautiful, more wonderfully planned, or more generously enriched with art. And art was everywhere. And it was really beautiful. And I had never seen anything like that. And it is wonderful to see the people who helped bring that together, to help bring that feeling of such a remarkable and beautiful planned community together for us. And I can't appreciate or even express how much I appreciate living with that much beauty for so long. It's really been remarkable. About tonight, I would like to say that I felt like I was introduced to a number of really professional tools, and that this was a lesson in thinking for me. So it was a lesson in standards and principles and methods. And I saw ways to compare things, lists of principles that could be used in many, many occasions. And for me, it was like going to school and learning how to do these things and how to compare them, how to make graphics that allow you to look at different approaches and really meaningfully come up with an understanding of them. And so for me, this was a very positive experience and a very real one. So one thing I would like to say is I would like to issue a welcome to the people who were involved with Wagner Park, to the extent that I might be able to stay on the community board. I would like to welcome everyone to be as involved as possible and to teach us, because citizens really don't know so much about, we might know it when we see it, but we don't have to build it and we don't have to create it. And the effort of that kind of creativity is rare, unusual, and we really need to protect the matter in principle and in fact, and embody it in our own thinking, voting, and use of public money. The final thing I think I want to comment on is what I'll call methods of democracy. I think I think it's really difficult to be a member of a community board because communities are made out of so many different opinions. And what's true for me is I think the lesson of humility, and that is I'm rarely, if ever, right. And people have ideas that I've never seen before. And I think that it's really important for all of us to work on how to make democracy work better without without unintentional roughing, without tackling the kickers and running into the quarterbacks. It's really important to take care of the whole process and to respect each other and have methodologies and courtesies that instill that and continue that. So thank you for this chance to speak a little bit.
Thanks very much, Bob. I couldn't think of a better way to close out this meeting, but with concepts of information gathering and giving, respect, and democracy. I'm going with that. And an immense thank you to the architects and landscape architects who were here tonight. I think it's a lovely way to say goodbye to Wagner Park potentially as we see it closed and moving on, and for all the hard work that everyone has done on this for so many years. And just heartfelt thanks and respect and appreciation for the kind of work you do. I very much hope that you will, as Bob should suggest, help us out as we go forward into the Northwest terrain and further north. Be really curious to your thoughts, because of course I know you did the Esplanade itself, so we're going to have a lot of questions about that. So I hope you're, after having beaten around a little tonight, I hope you're going to be willing to come back and help us. But I hope everybody, in hindsight, will find that this was helpful and allowed for a public, discussion of something that's been kind of lurking about behind the scenes. And I guess I just thank you all for participating. I thank Tammy and Lucian for being open to the idea of having this conversation. I think it was a really important one for the community. I think it's great to see the community working together. There are many factions with not-for-profits, board members, and such. And I think I think we're all learning from this experience that it is critical to get in early and be really working together consistently from the beginning on all these projects, and really open to vast amounts of information, really pushy to make sure we get it. So I don't have more to say except thank you again and good night.
Alice, I just want to add one thing before you say good night, and also Nick Spordone has his hand up. But before, and there were a couple other people whose hands were still up. But I do want to ask the team. Yeah, sorry, Alice. But they were. I mean, the information was amazing, and as you say, having the alternatives and looks. I wonder if you'd be open to having a review on the conversations we're having also on the east side, which is so seriously important, because those are, I mean, not only Battery Park City and the Northwest Resiliency that goes up to North Moore Street and all the way over to along the Washington Market Park, but really the total transformation of the east side of Manhattan from Brooklyn Bridge to Staten Island Ferry Building is underway. So we would love to have you come back, and I promise it'll be a lot easier next time, because we'd like to have you along in the bus with us as we're going, to have some voice and comments. If you need any information to catch up with that, I think Alice and I have tons and tons and tons of it, and we'd be happy to share that with you.
Great.
Okay.
Take a look.
Thank you. I'm glad we're getting here on the right foot. Okay, well, so Nick Spordone is the, I forgot the title, but welcome, Nick, Communications Director at the Battery Park City Authority. It seems like somebody who, I didn't see your hand up until the final hour when I'd already closed out the meeting in my mind, but Nick, we're delighted to have you make a comment. So go right ahead. Thank you. Yes, Nick. Welcome.
Okay, I'm sorry. Hi.
No
Hi,
problem.
good evening,
Welcome.
everyone. Just very quickly, and thanks. There was one question I think that came up I just wanted to answer was the question about what happens during construction on the South Battery Park City Resiliency Project, and whether it will be less protected, and the answer is no. Wagner Park will be no less protected during construction of the South Battery Park City Resiliency Project than it is today, as we sit here, and until it's made more climate resilient in the face of changing climate. So just wanted to make sure that folks knew that not being any less resilient for the work we're doing, even while the work is happening.
Thanks, Nick. While you're
Thanks.
here, if we can ask when we'll be able to engage on the Northwest Battery plans while we're all focused on this park.
Yes,
Is that
thank
coming
you.
next month? So
Thank
just
you.
while we all are gathered, we all can be aware of when the community board will be. I think it's December, but I just want to make sure. I know you've extended the deadline for comments on the scoping until the 30th December, but I just wanted to ask that while you're here.
Yes, thank you for the plug. Very helpful. So we had our public scoping meeting last week, last Wednesday, 16th, Wednesday evening at Stuyvesant High School. That was in person and online. As a quick aside, I think Spring brought up a little bit tonight, and it's true that as we kind of get back out in a kind of post-COVID world, we're seeing new and different ways to continually engage folks. And one of the things we are doing, at least, is essentially holding all meetings now both ways, right? To the extent that they're done in person and we can all get together is great. We're also doing them all kind of simulcast or online at the same time. We did that last Wednesday, and as you had noted, Alice and Tammy and I had some good conversations about that. This came up tonight as well about environmental reviews. There's a set amount of time that is essentially laid out by the kind of state law about how long environmental review should be. At a minimum, we push that out again through the end of the year, so through December 31st, 2022, for folks to comment on the public scoping document, which is essentially kind of the components that will be involved in the environmental review. To aid in that, and again, I thank Tammy for her work here, because the format of the meeting last week was essentially kind of mandated by state rules, where it's essentially just you give public comment. There's not that kind of give and take like we're hearing tonight, or that we usually have in our open community meetings where there's questions and answers. We wanted to make sure that the public had an additional opportunity to do that, both to ask questions about what they may have seen last week at the public scoping meeting, and also get some follow-up answers for any questions they had from the last time we did an open kind of community meeting about the Northwest, which was September 19th. All of that is my long way of saying we will be in front of the community board in early December at a date TBD. I don't want to jump, I want to steal Lucian's thunder, but it'll be early December. We'll be back in front of the community board, and we will have a team here able to answer, again, questions both from the public scoping meeting and from the September 19th, last time we got together on the Northwest, so that the community board can have a fulsome conversation about those questions, get answers, and then have ample amount of time to develop a resolution, presumably that they'd like to do in advance of the closing of the public scoping meeting on December 31st. Going forward, and I'm sorry, Alice, but as you can tell, I get excited about engagement stuff. In January and February, what we will do, and again, we took this as direct feedback from some of the folks that we saw at the Northwest meeting on September 19th. Instead of simply having our next public engagement meeting be a large meeting that tries to cover all 7 reaches in one fell swoop, which I recognize is a lot of information and a lot of detail, we're going to be doing reach-specific meetings over the course of the months beginning 2023. So for instance, hey, if you're interested in reaches 1 or 2 or 3 and 4, there'll be kind of separate nights that we want to try to do for each of those. So instead of taking, a necessarily broad look, because there's so much material to cover at once, you can kind of do a deeper dive on each of those stretches, which we hope will be helpful to folks. It will mean more meetings, of course, but it will also mean in parallel that we can kind of go a little deeper on some of the questions folks are having before we then bring it all back together for the next time we get together on the entire project. So more to come. Certainly, next touch point will be early December. You'll see that date come across soon. We'll be right back here with the community board, and then early next year with reach-specific meetings as we move forth with the Northwest project. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick, and I hope that this meeting was helpful to you as well, and the authority to outline some of the things that we should really try to press for going forward, you know, in terms of questions about carbon footprint and questions about full, you know, very comprehensive plans and, you know, great visuals and a full-fledged review of alternatives and the like. I think it would be really helpful to keep all that in mind as we go forward, so we, you know, have learned from this experience and go forward well together. So thank you. Okay, so now I think I can close out this meeting.
Alice, you're talking, but you're muted. It
Sorry.
ended, it
I-
ended with, so now I think I can close out this meeting.
And thank you, and thank you. I think that's it. Thank you, Tammy. I'm closing out the meeting. I'm thanking again, heartfelt thanks to our presenters and to the committee and to all the community that showed up. And I hope this was, you know, a helpful meeting in some ways. And onward and upward. Okay, good night, all. Thank you.
Thank you, Alice. Thanks, Lucinda.
Good night,
Thanks,
everyone.
Jeffrey.